Recording. So good morning, everyone. This is Corey Anderson. I'm the president of the Rocky Mountain NetSuite user group. Thank you for joining us today. This is, I think, our fourth or fifth remote meeting at this point, and we will be able to go back in person eventually, but thank you for joining us remotely. Here is our agenda for today. Our welcome in general business, that's right now. Then we're going to hear from our meeting sponsor, PaceJet, for about 10 minutes. After that will be our main presentation, SuiteScript for non-scripters, presented by Mike Kachline from Vertafore. After that, we're going to hear about our 2020.2 updates, and that will be presented by Gavin Davidson. He is a lead NetSuite Product Manager. And then after that, our tips and tricks, we'll hear from Margie Cominos, our board member. And then we'll have our open forum afterwards where you have the opportunity to ask questions or raise any challenges that you've had. And as a group, we'll try and help each other out. So our membership, excuse me, we now have 1,129 members. That may have gone up since I made this presentation. We have a lot of members as part of our user group. Membership is free. You can register at RMNSUG.org. When you register, that ensures that you get notification of upcoming meetings and events. You also get access to our LinkedIn forum, which I'll talk about in a little bit here. We also usually get a $400 discount to SuiteWorld. If you plan on going to SuiteWorld, we get a discount code just for our user group. And then also, we are now offering CPE credits when available. So far, we've been able to offer CPE credits ever since we've attempted to. So I foresee that each meeting we should most likely be able to offer CPE credits. Today, we have 2 CPE credits available. If you are not a member, please sign up. We do request that you be a member to obtain the CPE credits. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute as well. Our membership also gives you access to our LinkedIn user group forum. We have 494 members currently. The purpose of our LinkedIn user group is to support each other with questions and answers, follow up with questions and answers from the meetings that maybe we can't get to today, or maybe that are tough questions that we can't answer. We also use our LinkedIn forum as our platform for announcements. When our presentations, our notes, our discount to SuiteWorld is available, we'll announce it there. And then also, we like to see post job openings there. So if you have a job opening within your company, you can post it on the user group forum. We do keep the user group forum private, so it's not a public group, so you do need to be a member, and all you have to do is sign up on our website. The reason we keep it private is because we don't want it to be very spammy, so we monitor the posts that are on the forum and make sure that it's relevant content, and then our Suite app sponsors are allowed to post on our forum every once in a while as well. So I just want to talk a little bit about where you can find us. First of all, we have our website, RMNSUG.org. That is our hub for all of our information. All of our meetings and everything else are posted there, and I'm going to go show you the website here in just a moment. We also have a YouTube channel. You can go to YouTube and search RMNSUG, and it'll bring up our YouTube channel. We do post all of our meeting videos on our YouTube channel, but we also post them on our website. But if you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can get notified of when we put a new meeting post up automatically. And then you can also find us on LinkedIn, of course. The group is linkedin.com/groups/5099096. But you don't have to remember that. You can typically just go to LinkedIn and search RMNSUG or Rocky Mountain NetSuite user group. So real quick, I'm going to try and switch over so I can show you this website. Oops, we're not going to go there yet. We will go, sorry, here. Okay, so this is our website. RMNSUG.org. Here we have information about our upcoming meetings. We have information about our meeting sponsorship. You can register here. But what I really wanted to show you is our posts. So when you go to our posts page, this is basically all of our meeting recordings. And then if we have any slide decks or content that is available to you, you can download that from here. So here's our slide decks from our NetSuite 101 meeting. And then as you go down the list, you can see there was our workflow meeting, our RevRec meeting. So there's all of our information is stored here, and you can always go back and access our meetings later on. Here's our YouTube channel. Not a lot going on. It's just our meeting recordings there. It's a little bit richer experience to access our content through our website. Okay. And so I will go back to here. Okay, so I would like to take a moment to offer any member announcements. You can post something in the chat window of the GoToMeeting, and we can announce that. So if you have any job openings, if you have any, if you're looking for a new job or anything, you can go ahead and post that in the window. I'll wait just a moment, wait for anybody to post something, and then we'll move on. So any announcements, go ahead and post it in the chat window. Anything? From RF Smart has several NetSuite related openings. Stephanie, if you would please post those on our LinkedIn platform, our LinkedIn forum. That way people would have an opportunity to go see that. Thank you. Any other announcements? Going once. Cheryl Gardner, a new independent NetSuite consultant. So Cheryl, you might want to post that on the LinkedIn forum as well. That way people can contact you if you're looking for some work. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and move on. Thank you for that. So I'd just like to take a minute to recognize the board. This is the board of directors for the Rocky Mountain NetSuite user group. So first of all, that's me, Corey Anderson. I'm the president. And then we have Margie Cominos. She is our sponsorship and member chair. Margie is with PlantScan Corp. Then we have our communications chair, Mike Kachline from Vertafore. That's the guy who's going to be doing our presentation today. And then we have our treasurer, Casey Johnson from Doozy Solutions /Crafted ERP. Doozy is one of our meeting sponsors today. And then we have our speaker chair, Peggy Evleft from RSM US. And then our events chair, Dana Larson of Dana Larson Consulting. So we all work behind the background to bring you these meetings and make sure that we have good content and that we're able to share that with you and to ensure the continuity of this user group so that we can share information with the NetSuite community. So thank you to the board for doing what you do, and I definitely appreciate it. A couple of reminders: evaluations will be emailed to you to complete same day as the meeting, so today. If you wouldn't mind, please just take a few minutes to fill out that evaluation. It helps us learn how to do things better or guides us in what content that people are interested in seeing, so please take a minute to fill that out. And then also, please register for events using the same email as your membership record so you don't end up with two memberships. That way we have a good, clean database of our members. We do use NetSuite, a production NetSuite account, to manage the user group, which is provided to us by NetSuite. And so if you have duplicate customer or member records in NetSuite, you will get duplicate emails, and we don't really want to clean all of that up. So please use the same email as you register with. We'll talk a little bit about meeting sponsorship. So membership to our user group is free to you, of course. The cost of our meetings is supported by 2 levels of sponsorship. We have a Suite App sponsorship and a consulting sponsorship. Suite App sponsors must be available through suiteapp.com, and we do vet and make sure that those Suite App sponsors are legitimate Suite Apps. And consulting sponsors must offer NetSuite consulting services and have certified NetSuite consultants on staff. So our goal here is to give you a couple of different opportunities to see other companies in the NetSuite space, to see what other offerings Suite Apps can do, and then if you are looking for consulting firms, we have that offering for you to see as well. You can sign up if you or your company is interested in signing up for sponsorship. You can sign up at rmnsug.org/sponsorship. Our upcoming meetings, we have coming up later this year, a couple of months from now, our customization meeting, which we'll talk about fields, records, lists, centers, tabs, and more. This is a great meeting if you want to learn how to get more out of your NetSuite instance. We'll show you how to do some basic customization, maybe a little bit of intermediate customizations as well. And at this point, I am the one who is planning on doing that presentation. And then in January 2021, we're coming back to our saved searches meeting. Saved searches is always very popular. We're going to basically start from the beginning, and we'll do how to do basic save searches, and then we'll get a little bit more advanced as we go through the meeting and talk about how to do some advanced stuff with save searches as well. Save searches, we feel, is one of the most powerful tools in NetSuite that you can use to access the data. And so it's really important to understand how to use those effectively, because they can be used in so many different aspects of NetSuite. So looking forward to those meetings coming up. CPE credits for today's meeting. Certificates will be issued within 15 days after training. If you have any problems registering for the CPE credits or signing in for the CPE credits, email info@rmnsug.org. And CPE credits are sponsored by Eide Bailly, so that's why there's some branding on there. So CPE compliance, we're required to state this. So to receive CPE credit for attending today's session, you must sign in and out of the session using code words. Mike Kachline will give you those code words at the beginning and the end of his presentation today. The facilitator, in this case Mike, will provide the first code word at the start of the session and then provide you a checkout code word once the session is complete. So you can log in with your computer, click the link that was provided to you in the email. So if you registered and you clicked that you wanted the CPE credits, you should have received an email on Monday night that has a link to the URL to sign in for those credits. Fill out the information and enter the check-in and check-out words. It's really a simple process. I also this morning at the very top of the chat window posted the CPE URL. So if you didn't get that, or if you don't want to go dig for it in your email right now, just go to the top of the chat window for GoToMeeting and the URL is right there. Again, we don't have that first code word yet. Mike is going to give that at the beginning of his presentation. So I would like to say thank you to our consulting sponsor today. Our consulting sponsor is Doozy Solutions. Doozy Solutions is a consulting service led by a team of NetSuite experts. Utilizing NetSuite, Doozy's primary focus is to create premier solutions that disrupt underserved industries. Our vision is to continue to be a major disruptor in the industries we serve through emphasizing our relationships with clients as much as the quality of our work. Doozy specializes in immersing itself in niche categories to create custom solutions that will help customers reach their full potential. Doozy Solutions is also known as Crafted ERP. So thank you for sponsoring our meeting today, Doozy. We appreciate you. And then I'd also like to say thank you to our Suite App sponsor today, PaceJet. PaceJet, you're going to hear more about in just a moment, and we will hear from Stephen Reich of PaceJet. So I'm going to go ahead and switch the presenter over to Steve, and then you can take it away. Give me just a moment to
Thank you,
switch
Corey.
over. we can hear you well. Let me
Excellent.
find you in my list. By the way, we have 183 people register to attend the meeting today. So it just keeps growing and growing for us with these remote meetings, which is awesome. All right, Steve, you should be good.
All right, let me share that. Okay, and start this up. So just a couple overview slides. But thank you very much, Corey, and thank you to the Rocky Mountain NetSuite Users Group for having me. My name, again, Steve Reich. I'm an account executive here at PaceJet. And what we've got today, just a couple slides for an overview of what PaceJet is, but then I'm going to go in and I'm going to do a couple demo transactions using our NetSuite sandbox environment. Now, an important thing is that we are going to be doing a giveaway. So the URL, it's in the presentation that I'll make available to the user group as well. Not sure the rules, Corey, but you know, if it's acceptable, I can also paste this into the chat so that people can jump to that as well.
Yep, that would be
but
great.
We're going to give them, okay, fantastic. I'll do that here momentarily. We are going to give away something from one of our PaceJet customers. So you know, it could be something from Orca Coolers or William Rome, something like that. So a nice little giveaway, you know, for that. I checked with our marketing team. Unfortunately, we are not going to give away a guitar from Chicago Music, but you know, hey, it still should be something nice. You know, I've got you know, 10 short minutes here. So real quick, PaceJet. So we are a shipping solution. We handle the rating and shipping portion of order fulfillment. So we work very well with companies such as RF Smart, Oracle Cloud WMS, DSI, you know, the infrastructure that works in that NetSuite environment to handle warehousing and order fulfillment processes. And PaceJet ourselves, we are a multi-tenant cloud service. So we have a NetSuite bundle. We've been integrated for NetSuite for over 10 years. We are a Built for NetSuite solution. In 2017, we were the Cloud Partner of the Year, which was a great honor for that. We are a fully integrated shipping solution for NetSuite. We have customers that ship from a few shipments a day to customers that ship thousands of shipments a day. So it pretty much runs the gamut of you know, any industry, vertical, and you know, many different size of customers as well. And the other thing is that our carrier network is our network. So we maintain API-based connections to all the carriers on our network, whether they be parcels such as FedEx, UPS, LTL such as SIL, YRC, ABF, etc., and then also 3PLs and regional shipping services as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump out to my NetSuite environment. So what I have here is a NetSuite fulfillment sitting here on a pick stage. So this would be a scenario that you might have gone through a fulfillment, you've done your pick with RF Smart, and you've are now ready to ship this particular order. So we've got some network gear on here and some speakers for our system. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to drag this little bar out of the way so I can actually get to my tabs. And I'm going to open up my PaceJet shipping workbench. Now I'm going to do two transactions here. One is I'm going to use the PaceJet shipping workbench directly, and then I'm going to do a freight shipment and show how we can trigger that directly from within NetSuite. But this screen right here is what many of our warehouses are using. For a couple of reasons. One is that every line on this page represents an order fulfillment out of NetSuite that is ready to be packed and shipped. So we handle the containerization as well as the shipping transaction for the order fulfillments. Another thing is that the action of using PaceJet, we are using a separate tab within the same browser that I'm using with NetSuite. But in order to use PaceJet, we are not consuming a NetSuite license. So if you are using a solution such as RF Smart to create your picks, you're picking the bins, you're delivering those to your pack stations. The pack station itself is not going to consume a NetSuite license in order to complete that transaction. Now, first on my list here, I've got order number 27617 here, which is this fulfillment record that we delivered from NetSuite. So if I go ahead and I open that, what you'll see is that we've got the information that was passed over from NetSuite. We have some header information. I've got my order number. We can pass things like customer reference, purchase order number, things like that associated with the shipment that we can associate with that particular order fulfillment. But I've got my ship from information from my warehouse. This came over from NetSuite. My ship to information came over. We do support residential flagging. Now, I'm going to kill two birds with one stone on this. I'm actually going to do an export shipment. So we're shipping from Boston and we're shipping to Toronto. So I'm going to do this to show that we also support additional documents required for the international shipping transaction. And this is all standard as part of PageJet. So parcel, LTL, domestic, international shipping is all part of our core functionality. Now, I mentioned that we do the packing in addition to the shipping transaction. So in this case, what we have is a large size box. We pass dimensions and weights to the carrier. So that dimensional pricing, we support that as well. And if I look at the details of this, you can see that all of these items are fitting inside this box. Now, to get the packing completed, we have several ways to do that. We have an auto pack solution, which will take the items based on the order out of NetSuite, and we'll fit them into your container profiles and just predetermine how they're going to be shipped. We also have a scan to pack, and we also have a drag and drop packing interface as well to get that done. Special services, things like, I need Saturday delivery, adult signature, etc. These can be passed over from NetSuite as well. And we do support multiple shipping scenarios like third-party billing, shipping on your customer's account number, things like that. Now, for this shipment that's going to Canada, I've got my one box, weighs 19 pounds. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rate this shipment. Now, when we rate the shipment, we are sending this to all the carriers that you have negotiated rates with. So we onboard your account numbers with the carriers, and we use that for the rate shopping so that you're saying your rates come back. Now, we've got predetermined or preset here the USPS priority mail, which came back as the cheapest service. We also got rates back from UPS, from FedEx, DHL, and even some LTL carriers came back, with that. Now, if I look at the UPS tab, you'll see that we also have transit times that are coming back. So we can look at how long is it going to take to tend to this particular shipment. And we also have a markup engine. This particular shipment is a prepaid and charge, meaning that I'm going to charge my customer a markup over what my cost is. We provide you with the tools to be able to do that based on a percentage or based on a fixed dollar amount. So you can administer, those rules for that. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to ship this with UPS standard service. And we're tendering the shipment now with UPS. So we're manifesting that shipment. We've completed the carrier transaction. This is a sandbox environment, so we're waiting for the NetSuite update to occur here. You can see that we've completed this transaction. Now we've captured our costs. We've got our label printed to our label printer for our UPS standard service, so we've got that done. You can also see that we generated our international documents. So things like our USMCA certificate of origin is automatically printed for this particular shipment. We also map over our harmonization tariff codes. So this came over as a result of the commodities that were on that order from NetSuite. So complete automation of the document generation. And again, similarly, our commercial invoice, we're generating this as well as part of this transaction. So it's a complete transaction. We printed our labels, we printed our documents associated with it. And if I go back and I look at my fulfillment record in NetSuite and just do a browser refresh here, you can see that we're now in a ship status. We shipped it UPS standard service, so we've got that updated. If I look at my PageJet tab, you can see we've captured my cost as well as what the customer's cost would be for that. And I've got my tracking information, including a carrier tracking link that we write back to the fulfillment record so that you can forward this to your customer to give a one-click, here's the status of my shipment. And again, we also write back what the contents of that particular package was. If we had multiple boxes on this order, you would see multiple lines here, each with the tracking information. And you also see that we write that information back to other tabs as well, as far as the NetSuite standard tabs go, for this information, for that. So complete order fulfillment, passing of information back and forth between PasteJet and NetSuite. No copy and pasting, and we can rate shop across multiple carriers simultaneously. We do not have to go and do a set the shipping method, then rate shop it, set the shipping method, rate shop it as well. Now, to wrap things up, I just want to, for completeness, I'll go ahead and I'll close this. I'm going to do a freight shipment as well. So I've got a shipment with these items called cooler packs, and this one, I'm doing this off a sales order. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to freight quote this from a sales order this time. So I want to be able to see what the freight cost is for my customer before completing and releasing this to the warehouse. So again, we have the information that passed over from NetSuite, ship from, ship to information. This time though, we've determined that this is going to fit on 2 pallets. So we've got an 800-pound pallet, a 550-pound pallet. But just like the HTS codes on the previous shipment, we map over our NMFC codes based on the commodities that are on that particular that particular order, in order to pass that information over. Now, I had this pre-selected as UPS freight just for speed, but again, it's a similar interface. We'll get multiple tabs back. I just want to speed things along by limiting, how many freight carriers are going to come back with this. But I've got UPS freight LTL here as my shipping method. And if I go ahead and select that, and I look at my sales order, in the NetSuite side, what you can see is that we've captured our shipping cost, and our shipping method has been captured, with NetSuite. Now, if I go and I do my fulfillment, just like I did before, and this could be, using like the RSmart process or another process to create my my warehouse picks. This will generate my my fulfillment record in NetSuite. Probably very familiar to you, but I can also do my shipment straight out of NetSuite. So I can go ahead and I can click the ship button here, which is going to open this particular fulfillment. And again, we've got the information that passed over for that. And I can go ahead and I can complete that particular shipment. So just like on a parcel shipment, it's the same process for an LTL shipment. It's just in this case, what we've got back is our bill of lading is auto-generated for this particular shipment. So again, full automation of the shipment and completion of that particular process. Now I'll go ahead and I'll put the link for registering for the drawing in the chat window. But I will provide this information to Corey and his team as well with the presentation. But please just reach out if you have just questions about shipping with NetSuite, or if you have a particular need or know somebody with a need, just give me a shout. We'll talk through it and we'll go through the requirements and put a possible solution together for you.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve.
All right. Thank you very much.
Sponsoring. All right, we're going to go ahead and switch over to our main presentation. Give us just a moment to get Mike Kachline online here.
Morning, everybody.
Hello. Where'd you go?
I'm one of the green microphones, if you're looking at my list of people.
Well, you're not in the list alphabetically. Can you click on request present?
Yes, where is that? I don't see where that is, Corey. Sorry.
At the bottom, there's a share screen. Do you have a share screen at the bottom?
I do, but it's grayed out.
Okay. Well, I don't see the list. Apologies, everyone. Hang on just a moment, please.
Okay.
K at the top. It's just K.
And for those of y'all on the call, some of you are not muted too. It's not just one or two. It looks like a little handful. So maybe check your status.
Margie, if you can see Mike in the list, can you please make him the presenter? I can't. He's not in my list.
Mike, if you click on that screen button, does it send a request?
No, it's grayed out.
All right, let me
And
try
I see
this.
that he's in with K with the green mic. Does that help you, Corey? I'm
That's
reading
Margie.
Yeah, I'm K with the green microphone.
All right, hang on. Thanks.
Oh,
Yes.
there we go.
Okay.
Let's see. All right. Let's see. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Well, we will get started. So, good morning, everybody. Thanks for attending. Hopefully, I'm hoping that this morning and today you will come out knowing a little bit more than you came in. So today's topic is scripting for non-scripters. So the intended audience here is basically people who are not developers to kind of get some more understanding of what is this thing that like everybody talks about in NetSuite about scripts are so cool and oh, you can do that with a script, or I don't know what just happened. Oh, a script did that. Well, what does that mean? So I'm hoping that we can kind of learn a little bit more detail about that. So topics we will cover. So the super basic questions here. So what is SuiteScript? We'll cover that from a super high level. Why would you use it? And then what types of scripts are there? I think this is going to be really valuable for those of you who use, which is all of us, use NetSuite every single day. Like, what are these scripts? There's different types, and we're going to go into that. Where do you find these things? This is really useful because, we're going to go into like, how do I know, how can I prove that a script made this change or not? So we're going to go into that. What's running? So this is primarily in the context of scheduled, scripts that run on the schedule. So is something running right now? I don't know. When is it scheduled to run? So those kinds of things. Permissions we'll cover as well, because obviously NetSuite has a pretty deep permission structure. Logging we're going to cover. That's super important with scripts. Any developer will tell you that without logging, it's really hard. So you're going to learn that there's this whole world of information that scripts usually are talking about and trying to tell you, but you didn't even know to look there to see it. And then some noteworthy related items. There's other screens and tools that I'll cover related to scripts that are interesting. If you are a developer or have developers on staff, they probably already know about these, but if you're a manager type, you may not know about them. Caveats and limitations, of course, this is NetSuite, so there's always going to be some interesting caveats, so we'll cover some of those. And then finally, if you want to learn some more. So some context on who I am. I suspect some of y'all have heard my last presentation on revenue recognition. So I'm the NetSuite Group Manager at Vertafore. So Vertafore were the back end to many insurance companies in the country. We're I think a top 100 NetSuite customer. So we run a very large instance of NetSuite. Our NetSuite group alone is, I think there's 4 of us. So I come from a background of software development. I actually started in Georgia Tech with a computer science degree, went through a couple languages, wrote code, all that. And today I actually do write SuiteScript, but I also have a developer who reports to me and he writes a lot of it as well. So just kind of give you some context of like who's this guy talking to me and what does he know about SuiteScript? I have definitely been actively writing SuiteScript for quite a few years now. All right, going on. So first thing, CPE credit. So for those of you who are looking to get some CPE credits, this is your check-in keyword. So I'll give maybe a minute for y'all to write that down, or if you plug it into a site or something like that. All right, check-in keyword, fall. So we will carry on at this point. Okay, what is SuiteScript? So I'll try and not get too techy here. So SuiteScript is it's basically a JavaScript API, or maybe call it a SDK inside of NetSuite, which offers really extensive customization abilities. So I'm going to start, that's kind of a lot, so I'm going to kind of break that down a little bit. So JavaScript is a language that developers write. If you're in the kind of tech world, it's kind of the new, well, not the new kid on the block anymore, but it's very popular language. So language defining, like, how do I tell the machine to do something? Do I use squigglies? It's like a syntax concept. So JavaScript's very popular, and what NetSuite did was they said, hey, this JavaScript thing is really popular, and it has the advantage that it runs on the web browser, and we are a web-based platform, so that would be a great language to offer for scripting. So it's so SuiteScript is kind of a set of functionality built in the JavaScript API. So if you have a developer, or you're looking for a developer and they know nothing about SuiteScript, the question you want to ask them in the interviews is, do you know anything about JavaScript? Because if they do, they're going to be fine with SuiteScript. So NetSuite has evolved SuiteScript. They started with SuiteScript version 1, and that was a more functional kind of syntax. It worked a little bit like a language called PHP for any of those y'all who are in that kind of web space. So it's a very straight down write a function kind of thing. The NetSuite did introduce version 2.0. I don't remember which year it was. It seems like it's quite a few years ago now, but 2.0 gave you more of a abstraction in your code. Instead of just a bunch of functions that you could do stuff, there were like modules, and a module would actually talk about, like, I only want to deal with records here, or I only want to deal with emails, or something like that. The context of what we will be talking about in this talk is going to be SuiteScript 2, what NetSuite calls 2.x. So that's 2.0 and 2.1, which is now available if you flip a flag in your settings, or if you set it in your script headers. Your developers would know about 2.1, but it offers some new functionality that is really better for your developers, and from a functional, I need to get data out of NetSuite. 2.0 and 2.1, you're basically the same thing. Something unique about SuiteScript is that it runs on the server and the client. So, and we will get into this later in the talk, but you can write code such that it runs on the NetSuite server itself before, it basically figures stuff out and then sends the data, the information to your web browser, or it runs on a schedule or stuff like that. So that's like a server based. But you can also write SuiteScript that runs on your web browser. So it's like it gives you a much richer real-time kind of feel. So we'll talk about that. Those are interestingly called client scripts. So we will talk through those. SuiteScripts, you can schedule them. You can respond to events. We're going to go a little bit more into this, or a lot more into this in detail. But you can respond to different events. You can create APIs for third-party integrations. So this last bullet we'll talk about a little bit later, but it's really interesting if you, depends on where you are. Like nowadays, there's a lot of integrations like a Soligo where you can integrate with third parties, but those actually are just using SuiteScript at the end of the day to do the integrations. So why would you use SuiteScript? So a couple of examples. The top one is really kind of generic, but it's worth saying. So you want to enable functionality that you just can't seem to do anywhere else in NetSuite. So today's, like in the current day, the one I can think of right off the top of my head, and Margie's going to talk about this a little bit later after my talk, is enabling the use of SuiteQL, which I also have down here. But you can, there's basically anytime if you want to do something procedural in NetSuite, you either have scripts or you have workflows, and workflows do have limitations in them. So anytime you hit a point where you're like, oh, geez, I just wish I could do this like a workflow, chances are really good you could do it with a script. Validating data is really important. It's something we'll emphasize on throughout the talk. There's a certain type of script that is really good at validating data, but this one is very valuable. So this is where you want to validate data coming in before you save it. Custom sublists on forms. We've used this at Vertafore effectively, especially in SRP, and this is where you have like a form where you're looking at a record and you want to present data, but like you just can't get that data the way you want it in a saved search, but you know what you want and you know it should be possible, and probably do that with a script. Mass delete and update. As some of you probably know, mass deleting records is actually really hard in NetSuite, but it's with a script, it's like a 3-liner. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. PDF template magic. So some of you may have seen my talk, I guess maybe a year ago now, on PDF templates. And it turns out that with scripts, you can actually pre-calculate data and pass that to your templates before you render the template. So it allows you a really rich ability to create PDF content with data that's been calculated in very unique ways on the fly. Performing complex operations on each row of a search result. We're going to talk about that later on. That's actually probably the second most frequent used form of scripts that we use at Vertafore. SuiteQL is the new kid on the block, but this one is going to, I think, it's just so powerful. Like, this is has a lot of potential as far as I need data out of NetSuite presented in a certain way, and I need to either take action on that data or present it. Today, you can only really get to that through SuiteScript via SuiteQL. And then interacting with a non-NetSuite system via API. So this is, I was thinking about it last night. This would be, imagine if you had a custom record in NetSuite that, or like an asset record in NetSuite, that the asset was like, shares for stocks on the stock market, and you wanted to pull up that asset and actually see a field somewhere that like real time went and fetched the current, ticker, value for that stock. You could do that with a script, and it would be through APIs. So that would be where you can get NetSuite to reach out, but you can also you can create interfaces where, and we'll talk about this a little later, where external systems can reach into your NetSuite system and pull data out. So if you had your own proprietary system. Okay, so what types of scripts are there? There's a lot of types. So over here in the my little screen snippet here are, if you do a search of type scripts, you'll see there's actually quite a lot here. In this talk, though, we're just going to talk about these couple, primarily these up top, is Suite User Event, Client, MapReduce, Workflow. And then I kind of mentioned, and there's these other ones, and then yet there's other ones, but really these top up here are the ones that I think are very important for, this audience to learn about. So you are a NetSuite administrator, like, that these things called scripts are out there. You kind of think you have an idea what they do. Like these ones up here are the ones that they're the bread and butter, you will definitely find useful. The ones down here are, they're more dev focused, really. All right, so we'll go into the first type. So this type of script is called a suitelet. So in NetSuite, you can write scripts of different types. And the first one we're going to talk about is a suitelet. So a suitelet, from a high level, it creates a user interface which looks like NetSuite. So like PageJet had an example there where like, oh, we've got these things, there's probably sublists, but there's screens that you can actually create in NetSuite that look like native NetSuite. So this screenshot is an example of a script I wrote, I don't know, a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago now. It has this little wizard interface. It plugs into the menu bar. Everything looks like NetSuite. So if you ever see a script or a page like this, and you know it's not native NetSuite, maybe it came from a third-party bundle, chances are really good they use what's called a suitelet to create this user interface. So with that, you can, what can you do with a suitelet? So you can interface with other scripts. I guess the obvious that I didn't put here is with a suitelet, you can manipulate data behind the scenes. So you can ask the user for information, they can click next, and it can actually do something. It can change a record or go do a search and things like that. The suitelets can also interface with other scripts, so it can kick off another script to run, for instance. Suitelets can interface with third-party software, so this is probably a pretty common use for suitelets. In fact, in this screenshot here, that's exactly what we were doing. I was gathering information from the user, and then as it went through the screens, the suitelet would actually go out to a third-party software and fetch data. So custom replacement for NetSuite screens, this you can do. We've had to do, but you don't really want to do, because why rewrite something that NetSuite has written? But you might find times where there is a NetSuite screen that almost does what you want, but you just need that extra X, Y, and Z functionality. So writing a suitelet and just making the suitelet do what you want it to do. That's another example of using a suitelet. And then I guess this last bullet, which I should have put as the first bullet, is using a suitelet to query or manipulate custom records. And it doesn't have to be custom records, it can be normal like invoices as well. But oftentimes I have found suitelets useful for manipulating custom records in a very user-friendly way. All right, so that's a suitelet. The second type of script, probably the most important in my mind in NetSuite, is a script that's called a user event script. So sometimes you'll hear people refer to these as UE scripts. That's just an abbreviation for user event. So user events are used to respond to changes in record data. They also are used for printing calculated data, but really I want to emphasize respond to changes in record data. So this is the type of script that would fire if you had, pick any record type, you had a sales order and you filled it out and you clicked submit, and it would come back and it would say, not going to save this record because the such and such isn't filled out. Or the emphasis is here, you click submit. So you click submit and it comes back and says, you need this other record type added first, or something along those lines. So user events offer the ability to really kind of, validate what is being inputted before you save a record. It's also useful if you save the record and the record's fine, but then you want to trigger something else. Like, listen, every time I save a sales order, I want to go and reach out and make sure that this other record exists. So I create this other custom record, or I want to make sure this other data is in place, or something along those lines. that would be a user event script. So it's basically that, again, the goal here is like you have a record, you make a change, you want to do something after the change, or you want to do something before the change, user event script. Some other uses, displaying a complex calculated value. So this would be before you render a record, a user event script can fire. So this would be like, I want to pull up an invoice and I want it to show me, like a good example, I want it to show me the current stock price for this, this stock that I own. You could do that in a user event. The user event would say, okay, before I show the screen, go make this web service call out to wherever, to Yahoo, finance.yahoo, grab the numbers, pull them in, and then go render a field in this particular place on the form and put this value in it, and make the value clickable so that if you click it, it takes you over to that page. You can do all that with the user event script. Displaying the custom page field, kind of similar there. So this is really, it's what I just defined with like the stock price. You would literally put a field on the form without actually having to go and create a new custom form and add a custom body field. Like you can do it in the script dynamically runtime. You can do it where you render it only under certain conditions. So it's really kind of cool in the flexibility there. Before and after save we've talked about. So this is like before you save a record, you can go and do pretty much whatever logic you want and go check things. You can run save searches. You can, it's pretty much anything you can imagine. But the typical example would be with a before save is, are all the data, is all my data in place? Yes, it is. Or if I see this field in place, go check these other fields. A great example would be like, I think the recent for us is, address subrecords. Like before I save the customer, go check the address subrecord and make sure that they, if they have a state, do they have a country? Because that could be important, something like that. After save validations would be like, I'm going to save this record, but then I'm going to go and do the check. So like the address example would be, go ahead and save the customer record, but if you see something wrong with the address subrecord, then tell me about it. PDF template magic, again, I mentioned that a little earlier, but this is a user event script would fire on print. So this is an important concept to know as a non-developer is when you click that little printer icon, it is possible to trigger a script. It would be a user event script where the script fires right before that print is rendered. And the script can say, oh, wait, before I go render, let me go calculate some data. Let me go fetch some data and get it all ready to give it to the PDF template. And then the PDF template, as it's rendering, would say, like, I'm expecting to see data that's called this. I don't care where it came from. It may have come from the record. It may have come from a script. Doesn't matter to me. So there is that flexibility to be able to use a script to like intercept the print process and like calculate data real time. So that's really powerful, and we definitely use that at Vertafore effectively. Scripts can run regardless of context, or the user event. So one thing that's interesting is that user event scripts can, not always, we'll go into this later, but they can run if a record is updated via a CSV import, or if the record's updated via the user interface, or at times if the record's updated via other scripts like a MapReduce, which we'll see later. So one great thing about a user event, which we'll compare and contrast with a client, is that these validations will run regardless of how you modified the data, which is a little bit different than a client script.
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
There's a question from Shelley. What is the interaction between Suitelets and user events? And is it common to combine the two?
Oh, great question. Thank you. So there can be an interaction. So a Suitelet, if you can envision, a Suitelet just renders a page in front of you. It renders something you can look at on the screen with buttons and fields to fill in. And the Suitelet, if you click submit, it will take those and figure out what to do with those. Trying to think, a user event. So a user event is going to be tied to a record. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but the Suitelet is like a screen. It doesn't even have to have data behind it. It's just a screen with fields. And you pass these fields if you use the, I can't remember what they call it, but the little workflow kind of concept where you go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. Those fields are passed within the context of the Suitelet. The user event, the key is that they're associated with a record type. So do you combine the two? You can, in the context that if you use a Suitelet to modify like an invoice, your Suitelet would save, let's say save the invoice, and before the invoice is saved, that would trigger a user event. So they can be tied, they're not typically tied. Thank you for the question. Okay, client scripts. So client scripts are also good to talk about. So as a non-developer, even as an intro developer, the difference between a client script and a user event script can seem really confusing, because a client script is also used to change fields on the user interface that you're looking at, on the screen you're looking at, and it can also be used to validate data. The difference between a client script, the two key differences between a client script and a user event is that a client script is very real time. So this would be, for instance, if you can imagine, I think the example I had here was the import assistant, which probably we all use for importing CSVs. And if you've ever noticed, when you pick something in this import type dropdown, the values inside of record type change dynamically based on what you clicked in import type. And you never had to click next, or you never clicked a button for that to happen. All you did was pick the dropdown. That is an example. It's a really good example of how a client script would work, or what a client script is really good at. The client scripts watch what you're doing on the screen, only on the screen, and they can respond in different ways. So they can say like, oh, he just filled in this data and it's this magic value. I see that. That means I got to go enable this checkbox or disable a checkbox, or you can get into what you wanted to, like turn on an entire sublist or things like that. So client scripts also validate data. I guess by definition, they would validate data typically more before you want to click save. But the value of client scripts is they are real time. They interact with the user in a very interactive way. Like you can put little banners up at the top that says, hey, don't forget to add the blah. And you don't have to click submit, and then it goes to the server, and then it comes back and says, hey, you're missing this data. The downside to a client script is that it doesn't run in really any context other than on a screen. So if you were to go to your developer, or you were a new developer and you were told that I need to make sure that you do not save an invoice unless this particular custom field is in place. You just got to make sure to do that. If you were using scripting, a developer would say, well, I could either do that through a client script, or I could do it through user event script. Well, at least in my opinion, the correct answer there is you want to do it through a user event script, because you can catch that same condition either if it's through the user interface or a CSV import, or if another script has modified your invoice record. Again, a client script only works in the user interface context. Client scripts do or can be used in conjunction with Suitelets, which we talked about earlier. So, again, a Suitelet just renders a screen with fields on it. So you can, in that Suitelet, you can also tack on a client script to give you this kind of real-time dynamic feel to it. So that's a client script. Again, it's, if there's any take home on the client script, it's think real-time only on the screen. That would be the take home there. And then the user event, which we talked to earlier, that would be always runs on the server. It's a really good data validation. You know, many of you probably use workflows for a lot of these same data validations. User event would be the script version of a workflow for validating. But user events have all this other cool stuff you can do with printing. All right. The next type of script, probably the second most important one, I would say, is called a MapReduce. So MapReduce came out with SuiteScript version 2, which is kind of important to zoom back. So some of you might have NetSuite instances which are pretty old. And if you know, after this talk, if you go and you look through your scripts, like, I want to see what scripts I have, you might see that, you know, you have a mix of version of SuiteScript 1 and 2. MapReduce only runs with SuiteScript 2, which is fine. Everybody has SuiteScript 2. It's a very powerful script for doing repetitive operations. So to the point here, they can be scheduled. They're really ideal for running the same logic on every row from a search result. And they're also really ideal for operating on really large data sets. So some examples that I've actually used these for, so you know, do-it-yourself invoicing. So if you want to go and mass generate invoices from sales orders, but you have this crazy logic, like you don't always want it to invoice, or you want to use a different form if you see these conditions other than those conditions, a MapReduce would be good for that. Dunning, of course, is a module in NetSuite, and this is used for sending reminder emails to customers that they need, you know, they owe you. But it's, you know, it's easy to kind of figure out how you could do your own sort of dunning. Like, hey, I want to do a saved search of everybody who's 30 days past due, and I want to send them an email with this special PDF or this special email, and I want to attach these special attachments in it. MapReduce is also really good for that. And then payment generation, we actually do this at Vertafore very effectively. You know, if you need to mass create payments for people like with credit cards who have like a credit card on file and you just want to pay them on the day that they're supposed to pay, you can do that through a MapReduce as well. Other things you can do with a MapReduce, you can mass create, you can mass update, or you can mass delete, even if you need complete or complex logic. So again, anything driven off a search, if you can imagine conceptually, I have a search, you know, you think about the Excel spreadsheet that would come out, I've got 6,000 rows, and I just need this one set of logic to run on each row. I just need you to go through row by row by row, and with each row, take this logic and run it. And the logic could do anything. It could say, well, look at the data, go pull this other record, go compare these fields, and if these certain things, go pull this third record and look at that data, and then now from that third record, stick it in the first record, or print something, or send an email, or all of the above. MapReduce is really ideal for that. Mass delete you can do also. So that would be, you know, run a saved search, and if you see certain conditions, go delete the record. You can do that kind of things. Creating CSV is very interesting. I don't know how many of you ever had this issue where, like, you know what you want a CSV file with these, you know, 12 different columns, but you can only get to it through VLOOKUP. You know, you can only get to it if you run this search and then this other search, and then you VLOOKUP on this field, and maybe if you're really complicated, you have to filter something out. and that gives you your results. So you wind up, I'll just run this search and I'll run this search, and then I'll export both of them, and then I'll throw them in Excel, and I'll VLOOKUP, and I got my new tab. But you can actually use a script to do that. You could use a MapReduce to basically run your one saved search, and it would run other saved searches, match things together in memory, and then literally output a CSV file in your file cabinet. So another bullet about MapReduce, which is really interesting on a performance perspective, is that MapReduce is run in parallel. So when you renew your licenses with NetSuite, one of the things you can get are these things called Suite Cloud processors. And with a MapReduce, you can allocate multiple processors for the script as it runs. So I'm going to give you an example. If you had, you had to go through billing, and you got 10,000 different, let's say you've got 10,000 invoices you need to do whatever on, maybe email them out. Like with a scheduled script, you would do them one at a time, right? You do the first row in your search result, the second row, the third row, the fourth. But with a MapReduce, you can actually say, well, hang on, I've got 5 Suite Cloud processors. So I'm going to run the MapReduce, and it's going to, at any instant in time, there are going to be 5 rows being processed at exactly the same time. So that means, in essence, chewing through that 10,000, those 10,000 invoices or 1,000, however many you have, is 5 times faster, because a MapReduce can actually do things in parallel. We have found this like absolutely critical. At Vertafore, we're like at, I think, 25 now. So we use all of them for the processors. So MapReduce are good if you have a process that needs to, this very high data, takes a really long time to run. It's iterating through a saved search, and you need to get it faster. If you're doing it through a scheduled script today, you may very well want to consider moving it to a MapReduce and getting more Suite Cloud processors. That alone would help. Which is the last tip there, is use them instead of scheduled. That's just a general rule of thumb. There's some other interesting things about a MapReduce that we'll talk about later, as far as script execution limits, that these are much more flexible for a developer to make sure they don't run out of CPU cycles when they're doing data. All right. The next script, for those of you who use workflows, which I suspect some of you probably do, if not most of you have at least tried workflows, because workflows are kind of the kiddie pool of scripts. Like you start with workflows, and then you're like, but I need a little bit more, and then you kind of start like, oh, scripts, what about those? If you're in that space, this is the one you probably want to look at next. So it's a script called a workflow action. So this is where you have a workflow, you can get almost everything done, but there's that one thing that you can't do with a workflow because of a limitation. What you can actually do is write a script that can be called as an action within the workflow. And the script itself can do whatever scripts can do, which is basically anything. So like, with a workflow, you're kind of tied to the record that the workflow is operating on, but the script can just, it can go run a saved search and find other records and load them and look at them and modify them and whatever you want to do. So if you're kind of in that space of like, I've got this workflow, but there's just this one thing I can't do, a workflow action script is probably what you want to look at. So you create a little script that just does that one thing you want to do, and then you go to your workflow and you plug it in as an action, and then you can complete your workflow. So that's one great use for the workflow actions. The other that you could do is if you have a workflow that's just humongously large, like you look at it and you're like, oh my God, there's just so many steps in this, and there's this whole series of steps that really just conceptually is just one thing. you could consolidate all those steps into one workflow action script, and then your workflow, your boxes become a lot simpler to read through.
Hey, Mike, I have a question.
Yep.
On the workflow actions, and I'm sorry if you mentioned this, I just wanted to clarify. So is it possible for a workflow action to access, so typically workflows can only work on one record type or something that's
Yep.
linked, that's very closely linked to that. Can you access other record types via workflow action?
Yeah, just record.load, record.type is whatever, and ID is whatever. So as long as, and if you don't know the ID, you can search it. So yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. So now we go into the other types of scripts. What other kind? This is where I was like, and there's other types you'll need to know about them, but as a NetSuite administrator, maybe use them, maybe you won't. So scheduled script, I debated putting this in other, or is this its own kind of first-class citizen? Scheduled scripts you see very commonly, and scheduled scripts work a lot like what I just defined the MapReduce. So they scheduled scripts came before MapReduce. So it's the basic idea that I define a saved search and I write logic, and the logic runs against every single row of that saved search. Well, actually, no, I'm sorry, that's the mass update I'm thinking of. The scheduled script is more of I write logic and I just say that I want to run it on a schedule. The caveat to the scheduled script is it's single-threaded. So there's Suite Cloud processors, you're just using one. So if you need, if you're a beginning developer or you need to write a script that runs like, I need this thing to run every month or every week or every night, try a MapReduce first because, again, it scales so much better. But scheduled scripts are that. They're the predecessor. It's basically write code and run that code on a schedule. And scheduled scripts can actually do the whole, like the first thing the script does is runs a search and then it starts iterating through. It can do that, or it can just, I guess, what else would you do? I mean, it could look at a couple of distinct records. It's just whatever you want to run on this particular schedule. Map or mass updates. So for those of y'all who use page:/mass updates, which is what the screenshot is, you're probably familiar that NetSuite comes with a lot of kind of pre-canned things that you can update, where you can update records. And the updates in these cases are typically you define search criteria, and then you go to this other little sub-tab and you say, cool, for every row you find, go change this value to that value. A mass update is sort of the same way. It's scripts. So you define the saved search criteria and you say, cool, for every row, just go run this script, and the script will know what to do with the row. This one I really don't ever use anymore. These, again, you can supersede them with a MapReduce, but they're definitely worth mentioning. Portlets are actually a script that you, depending on your business model, you might actually be like, Mike, why didn't you talk this more? Like, this is super cool. Or you might be like, nah, we don't use portlets anyways. So portlets are, let's see if I can drag this over here, because I've got an example. Like in NetSuite, you have portlets on your, your main screen or your little dashboards. A portlet script, of which this is one, is a script where you can define exactly what you want to see inside the portlet. So in this case here, I'm showing links of queues. Queues are just basically how many records are there of each of these different types of custom records. So if you can imagine logically, what I'm doing is go do a search, a dynamic search for this custom record type, give me the number of rows. For this custom record type, give me the number of rows. This type rows, this type rows. So this portlet script renders this. So it basically creates this little table. It does each of these searches, and it comes up with each of the values and then renders them on the screen. So if you are the kind of company that has, you use portlets a lot in very effective ways, but you've found limitations onto what data you can put in a portlet, you can actually write a script to pretty much render whatever you want in that portlet. So that's very valuable. And with SuiteQL, it's even more valuable because SuiteQL just like whatever data you want, it gets a lot easier. So that is worth mentioning. Restless, this is good if you are, you're managing your company and the NetSuite instance, and you need to interact with external systems. Like most people these days, you would use a third-party kind of tool to connect your NetSuite instance to like your in-house application. But some companies are like, I don't want to pay a monthly fee for connecting when all we're doing is synchronizing this one record type. There is a type of script called a RESTlet, and a RESTlet is where you write code inside of NetSuite, and you basically tell NetSuite, okay, anytime anybody calls a web service called blah, like NetSuite will tell you what the endpoint is, go execute this code. It's kind of cool because NetSuite gives you like the framework for making it secure. Like you can't just like throw this open endpoint out the internet and people can just suck your data down. It's not like that. So they're using standards for authentication. But what's great about a RESTlet is that you can really custom tune the API endpoint. So like if you're dealing with somebody and they say like, oh, well, if only your NetSuite system had an API endpoint that we could consume this crazy custom record that you wrote, the answer is, well, we can just write a RESTlet that gives you exactly what you need for that, whatever data. So be aware that that is possible. It is something you can do. And then other types of scripts that are, we'll talk about SDF a little bit later, but there's like bundle install scripts and SDF installs. Devs typically use these, and these are where, when software is being installed on your system, it's kind of like a setup script that goes and makes sure that things are in place, or like it maybe creates some initial sample data or something like that. All right. Where are scripts found? So before we go in there, does anybody have any questions on the types of scripts? Because now we're going to go more into like the what and wheres of scripts. Okay, so I don't see any questions in chat, so we'll carry on. If you do have a question, keep typing and I'll monitor chat to see if something shows up. Okay, so cool, we know what types of scripts are, but like, where are these things? So there's three basic parts of a script, for lack of a better phrase. So there's a text file with code in it, like we've all heard of code. So we're going to kind of see that and some of my screenshots have been code. So there's like a text file with code in it, but NetSuite being NetSuite and being very records-based, NetSuite has a record called a script. NetSuite also has a record called a script deployment. So we're going to talk about these different things as well. So we're going to go into each one of these in the detail here. But basically, you've got the file cabinet and you've got the script record and the script deployment records. So the file cabinet. So if you go to your file cabinet, every NetSuite instance has a folder called SuiteScripts. Under SuiteScripts, it's anything goes under there. Most people just have a bunch of scripts under SuiteScripts. What I've learned very early is under SuiteScripts, it's a good idea to put a folder for each type of script. So MapReduce, user event, client, mass update, those types of things. But you don't have to do that, and you probably won't see that on your instance. But in any case, under SuiteScripts is typically in the file cabinet where you're going to find scripts, this source code. So these scripts are, they're text files at the end of the day. You can edit them with Notepad or Notepad++ is a better editor form. They have to end with .js. So the file name has to have a .js on the end, and JS is an abbreviation for JavaScript, because as you may remember, SuiteScript is just a kind of dialect of JavaScript. NetSuite is kind of cool, actually. This is a really handy feature that when you upload a script into the file cabinet, it recognizes it as a JavaScript file, and NetSuite actually does a quick check. It like reads your code really quick to make sure that there's no like blatant syntax errors in it. So a syntax error is the kind of error where the script just wouldn't be able to run if it ran. So when you upload scripts, it will kind of tell you like, hey, this, on line 40 or whatever, there's, a missing squiggly or something like that. And then the final thing, you can edit these scripts within the file cabinet. So be aware of that, that the security guy in me looks at that like, yeah, it's worth noting. I haven't heard of NetSuite being like in the InfoSec world as a target, but just be aware that these scripts can be edited in the file cabinet. Obviously if the person has edit permissions. So the second kind of place that you'd find a script is under page:/scripts. And where these are in the menus, I'm sorry, because I always use the global search. So when I say page:/scripts, that is what you type into the global search bar up top, and it will take you to the right place. So the script records are a record like you would expect of an invoice record or a sales order record or a custom record or item fulfillment. It is like a database entity. And it defines for NetSuite what this script should do and where the source code is. So it kind of makes that source code file in the file cabinet something a little bit more than just a bunch of text that looks like JavaScript. So the script record, you're telling NetSuite that, hey, NetSuite, that source code over there, it's something I want to do. I want to run it. I want to execute it at some point. You also give it a plain English name. So these, the file cabinet names over in this slide, like you can name these things anything you want to. We've learned at Vertafore, we kind of have a naming convention. You probably will too if you have developers. Our convention typically has the type of the script, and the 2 is if it's SuiteScript 2 versus 1. But your company might have a different naming convention. But in the script record, you can give a plain English name. This can be the send invoices script or the dunning script or whatever you want to call it. The script record, the page:/scripts, is a formal place to define what are called input parameters. This I won't go into too much. It gets a little more devy, but this is where you basically say, if the script fires up, I want to tell it what the best example is a MapReduce. I want to tell it which save search it should operate on. That's called an input parameter. Another really valuable piece of page:/scripts, which we're going to talk about later, is the script logs subtab, and we'll cover that a little bit later. Super valuable. Script records can be searched, so you can do a save search of type scripts and find, like if you wanted to know what are all my scripts, this is a really good way to do it. Do a save search of script records. All right, so you have a script. So again, a script record, what we just talked about is you're basically telling NetSuite, hey, there's this file out there and I want it to be executable. Well, I'm going to give an example of a MapReduce that you want to schedule. So maybe you want something scheduled like dunning. So dunning being where you're telling your customers that they're past due. So you might want to say well, I've got one script, and the only difference is that it sends a different email whether you're 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days past due. It's the same logic, It actually runs on the same save search, really, but the only thing different inside of the script is, well, the only thing different functionality-wise is I just use a different email template, let's say. So in a script deployment, what you can do this a couple of ways, but I'm going to define it in the script deployment sense. You can have a deployment that says, go run, so the better example is you can have one deployment that says, go run my script daily, and run that only against the people who are, who the invoice just went out today. And then you can have another deployment of the exact same script. So deployment just basically says, just go run that same script, except use a different save search, or except run it every week instead of every day, or a combination like, this second deployment, I want to run the script, but only run it, like weekly, but use this other search. Like maybe one of your searches is all of your Premier customers, but your other search is your non-Premier customers, and you want to run the same script against them, but your Premier customers, you only want to nag them monthly, but your non-Premier customers, you want to nag them daily, something like that. So a deployment is where you would help define that. The deployments are a subtab of the script record. So if you go into a script, you'll see a deployments. I didn't have a screenshot there. So you'll have a deployment subtab, and you'll have a list of deployments. I'll see if I can kind of get into some examples if I have some time there. And again, you can define your schedule. You can also see the execution log, so the logs. Oh, thank you, Matthew. I see you put where page scripts is. In the case of MapReduce, you can define how many processors you want to use. And then these others, it's yield and buffer size. That's something your devs need to figure out, but it's basically makes it go faster with a little bit more risk. All right, and then, so we also talked about the deployments is where you would define like the specific save search you want to run against, or if there's an input parameter of a checkbox, like, oh yeah, also send them the PO with their nag message or whatever. Okay, hopefully y'all hopefully your heads aren't spinning too much. All right, everybody, welcome back. Hopefully everybody was able to get a refresh on coffee, maybe check some emails or so. We will continue. Actually, before I continue, I did want to reach back. I was thinking about it on the script deployments. I don't remember if I had in the bullet points here. Two things actually. One is script deployments you can find on page:"script deployments. And the other is that these can also be, it's there, and they can also be searched. And that would kind of answer your question of, do we have a script running or scheduled to run every day that would send my invoices out or something along those lines. All right, so what is running? So we will continue forward. So this is kind of a more operational. Cool, so we know what kind of scripts exist, and we know where to find these things, but how do I know what's running? This is probably a really common question, like, you probably like, oh yeah, I think there's a script that runs that does blah, or like, does something trigger when I save an invoice? I have no idea. So we're gonna go through those concepts. These are really powerful if you're not a developer, but you need to know like what is happening on my system. That we're getting into those meat and potatoes now. All right, so a couple pages will go. MapReduces, so page:"MapReduce script status. So this one probably many of you do not know about. So this page tells you about any MapReduce script that's currently running. So when I say currently running, like running right now, not scheduled to run, but like currently running. It gives you kind of a couple of things. It also, you can go back in time so you can see what scripts have run in the past. there's a start and an end date, so you can see how long it took the script to run. And then if you have, say, 5 processors, but you have 10 scripts queued up, you'll see all 10 of them show up here, but only the first one, or depending on how you allocated your processors, you only see some of them actually running. The others will be like in a pending status. And oftentimes with the pending ones, you'll have a little link here that says cancel, which is valuable if you're like, oh, no, I don't want that script to run right now because I'm doing this other really important thing. You could go and click the cancel button, and then those scheduled MapReduces would just not run, and they would run when their schedule triggered them to run again. So this is handy for, again, MapReduce scripts. And again, as a refresher, MapReduces are most commonly used in a scheduled way, where they run on a schedule and they execute logic against typically against every row of a search result. So yeah, a bullet here that's a downside to MapReduces, it's kind of a big downside, is NetSuite doesn't give you a good way of stopping a MapReduce once it's started, which is unfortunate. So as a developer, at Vertafore, we've actually written code that goes and looks for basically a magic file in the file cabinet, and it will cleanly shut itself down. As an admin, the thing I learned early with MapReduces is if it was running and you're like, I've got to stop this thing, is you go edit the source code in the file cabinet and intentionally put errors in it and save that. And then as the MapReduce runs, it'll eventually reload that source code and it'll say, well, I can't run anymore because there's this error, and then that stops it. It's horrible and ugly, but that's how you stop a MapReduce, unless somebody wants to post a better way that I don't know about. All right, scripted records. So MapReduces just tell you about scripts of type MapReduce, which typically run on a schedule. Scripted records is probably the most valuable screen for answering the question, what scripts are running. Scripted records, though, only tell you about user event scripts and client scripts. So user events and clients, if you can remember, user events were scripts that run before you save or after you save on a record type. A user event is tied to a type of record. Client scripts are similar, but they run only in the context of the user interface. So what page::scripted records tells you is if you, and I just gave a little screenshot here, like let's say the project record, this tells me that there's 21 different scripts that would trigger on a project record. So you can then kind of go through, and I think I later have a page that gives a little more detail on this. Actually, let's see if I can pull that up, because that is a good one to show. It's a very important page. Let's go here. So if you had, say, project, yeah. So you have your project. We've got 20, it says there's 22 scripts. What you want to do is you want to click into the scripted record view. And there's a couple important things here. So you have subtabs, one for user event, one for client. These are probably the two that you care about in the context of scripts. So these are all the scripts that will trigger when you do something on a scripted or on a project in this particular system. And it's also important that they run in sequence. This is really important. I mentioned this later in the slides, but this script will fire, and then this one, and then this one, and then this one, and it'll fire in a sequence. So if you have scripts that are doing, manipulating the record as you go down, the one on the bottom will see the changes from the one on top, but the one on the top will not see the changes from the one on the bottom, kind of a thing. So it's very important to know. So scripted records is a good way of knowing what scripts are firing when I change this type of record. A good clue with scripted records is this from bundle column. So if you see a bundle ID, chances are it's like, in this case, it's a Celigo scripted record. So, or it's a Celigo user event. Basically, those are the ones where you're like, meh, don't really care. Unless you do, like we have one in our, I think our invoices that have to do with tax calculations. That's a really good example because sometimes, well, all the time, taxes are calculated based on data on your sales order or invoice. So say your shipping, your ship to record. So if you have scripts that are modifying your ship to record, you probably want to make sure the sequencing of your taxes is all the way on the bottom so that your scripts do their thing and then taxes calculate on that. So if you ever have a phenomenon where it's like, we wrote this script and we changed the data, but it doesn't do anything, like it keeps getting overwritten, it could be because the sequence of which your scripts are firing aren't right. You may want to flip the sequence. So page column scripted records, really good screen to know about of what scripts are running against a certain type of record. Again, there's user events, there's clients. We don't use client scripts quite as much at Vertafore. We usually use user events for most everything. All right. Page colon mass updates. So I don't know, some of you have probably used this. Some of you probably use this a lot, this page. Some of you probably don't use this much at all, but this is where you can do, again, just mass updates based on essentially search results. So if you have a script of type mass update and you run it, then you can see the, the results of that. It's, it's worth knowing about, basically. How to enable and disable scripts. So let me think about this. So your question probably is also how do I know what is scheduled to run? So we didn't cover scheduled scripts. So I'm going to go, because that is a good one to know. There's two things to know. One would be, so let me go to page column. Go a little off the reservation here, but scripts. If I need to log in again. Nope. Okay, well. Trying to think of this. So with the scheduled scripts, there's two things you could do. You could either go to page scripts. This is what I would typically do. And you would filter your type on type scheduled. And these would be your scripts that generally are going to be running on some kind of schedule. Especially if they're not marked inactive. And then if you wanted to know, when are they running, those are the deployments. So that would be more of a, what I probably owe this group is a search for this. So the deployments would show you, cool, this script is running on a schedule every day starting at whatever, or every hour. Sometimes they'll have that kind of a thing. So you can do a search of script deployments records to say, like, I don't care if it's a, whatever, does it have a schedule? What is the schedule? Is it deployed? And that's something else we'll talk about a little bit later. All right. So on the deployed, that's kind of where I'm at in the slides here. So you have deployed, you have inactive versus deployed. So this is, honestly, to me, it's also a little confusing in NetSuite. So you can mark a script as being inactive, and if it's inactive, it's not going to run. It's not going to show up as a script, basically. If it's the deployment checkbox happens on a script deployment record, and that's a good way of turning on or turning off a specific instance of the script. So like, again, the example we used earlier was I've got a dunning script I've written. I want to done my Premier customers only monthly, but my normal my non-Premier customers, once a week. you could use this deployment checkbox to say like, oh, there's something different, holidays or whatever, don't done the Premier customers. So you could uncheck deployed on that particular Premier script deployment record, and it just wouldn't run. And then you could just go recheck deployed, and it would start running again. Same, if I recall correctly, is the case with the user events. And then again, inactive is more kind of on the script level. Like I just want to, it's almost like a soft delete, right? Like I just want to turn this thing off. Testing, which I didn't circle in here, but we're going to talk about the script debugger a little bit later. But the thing worth knowing as an administrator about seeing a script that has a testing status, that script will only run, especially user event scripts, they will only run if the owner of the script triggers it. So like if you have a user event script who's owned by your developer, this could very well happen with if you have a developer writing code in-house and they're actively writing code on it. You could have a situation where the classic "it works for me." So your dev's saying like, "No, it works. Look," and you come up to their computer and they're like, "Yeah, see, I do this and it does that." And you're like, "Well, it doesn't work for me." And it's like, "Well, what are you running as?" "I'm running as administrator." "I'm running as administrator too." "Why does it work for you and not for me?" The answer is the developer probably put the script in a testing status, and the script is owned as themselves. So the thing you want to do is change the status to, I think it's called deployed or something like that, or released, I think it's the word. And that means everybody can run it. So key on that. All right, script permissions. So there's a couple things to know. So we talked about the status, so testing and released. That's the works for me, doesn't work for you, we're using the same role. Why is that? Go look for the script deployment status. Permissions are kind of important too. So this is actually really handy. You could have, it's really, really handy if you're talking the employee center roles. You know, you think about somebody, because employee center roles are cheaper licenses. So if you wanted to have somebody in the employee center go modify records that are not in the employee center, is that even possible? Well, the answer is, well, yeah. So the user in the employee center could trigger a script, and the script can be configured to execute as administrator. And administrator, of course, has the ability to modify records all through the system. So this execute as role administrator gives you the flexibility to write code in a script that kind of transcends beyond permission. So that would allow you effectively to have like a limited access user where you want them to do some very specific thing, but you don't want to give them permissions to invoice records or, you know, that kind of thing. You just, all you want is if they fill in this box, it pokes that value into the invoice. This execute as role is really key there. Another note here, the system information fingerprints. We'll talk about that a little bit later on logging, but you will see in system information on your records, you'll typically see if a script has modified your record. And if it's run as administrator, typically it's really vague. I think it says the user is like system or something like that. But if you don't say execute as role administrator, you just say execute as current user, then your system information log will actually tell you the user who triggered that script. So that's an advantage to not running as administrator, as you can see who triggered the script. All right, and then the user events being triggered from scheduled or MapReduce is something worth noting, that if you have a MapReduce or a schedule, something, let's just say a MapReduce, it's running against search results and it says this invoice, go modify like in the case that we have, go modify the due date. When your MapReduce saves the invoice record, it triggers the invoice user event to say, whoa, I've just been saved. What do I need to do? And it goes through its logic, of which in our case, it says, oh, if the due date is a certain thing, then go execute certain logic. So just be aware that scripts can trigger scripts, and usually the script being triggered is the user event. Cheryl has a question. When a script runs in testing mode, what records is it executing on, and are the changes to the records permanent? So great question, Cheryl. So in testing mode, the script runs on whatever records you've coded it to. So like if it's a user event script, you've tied it to an invoice or sales order or whatever. So it will execute on that record. If inside of the script itself, like, loads a different type of script and modifies that, it's modifying that. Are the changes permanent? Yes, they are. So the only, then what is this testing mode thing? The testing mode basically just says, when will the script run? So if it's in testing mode, the script would only fire if the owner of the script triggers it. It's the basic idea. So the idea that NetSuite was trying to do is like almost a soft release where a developer could put this code in and run it as them on a very limited basis, get it to where they think it's working, and then flip it into release mode, and now the whole world can run it. That's the idea. Obviously, a better best practice, which costs money, is that you get a sandbox environment, and you do all your scripting and write your scripting in sandbox prior to releasing it in production. It's a good question, Cheryl. Okay, script logging. So this is a really good one. So you may not know, but these scripts that when they run, developers can write code inside the script that logs useful information. And this, this concept of scripts writing logs has been around for like eons and eons, ever since code has been a thing. But NetSuite doesn't make it super obvious that this is happening, but as an administrator, if you know this is there, it's amazing. So there's two ways to get to these logs. One is you go to page:/scripts, and there's an execution logs subtab. So this is useful if you know which script, like it easily answers the question, did this script just run? If assuming the script is logging anything, you'll see that really quickly. And I'll see if I can show you an example shortly here. Another thing that's really useful is in NetSuite Save Search, there is a search of type server script logs. Then the super simplest search to run here is a server script log, every single log sorted in descending order by like date or ID. So it'll give you the most recent log at the top and the oldest log at the bottom. And that in itself is insightful for just asking like, what's going on? Like, is anything doing anything? So a couple of things on logging is that scripts don't have to write logs. So it is possible that a script could run and have no logging output at all. And that could happen for a couple of reasons. One is the developer may not have put any logs, which is pretty rare, but could happen. The other, which I didn't cover in the earlier screens, is when you configure your script deployment, you can tell NetSuite, hey, NetSuite, don't bother logging anything that's like at a level of audit or below. Basically, don't give me any noise. All I want to see are errors or things like that. So that could cause these logs to not show as much either. Personally, I always configure our systems to log everything, because usually when you need logs or when you're troubleshooting something, and it's really hard to troubleshoot when the logs just aren't there. A caveat to know is that logs don't persist, they don't last very long. And it's kind of different in where you look. So if you look in, let's pull over my screen here again. So if you look in a script, let's see, I'm trying to think of which, well, all right, let's start at the Save Search. If you go to Save Search, server script log, and just everything, and sort by internal ID. The logs have internal IDs because they're also records. So these server script logs, I honestly don't know what NetSuite's storage algorithm is, but I've seen that they seem to hang around for approximately a month or so. I think it's probably based on the number of records versus the date range, so your mileage may vary. But the important thing to know is that server script logs will show you more logs than if you went into a particular script or deployment record and looked at the execution log subtab. So if you look at the deployment or the script, there's going to be this execution log subtab, and this will give you all the logs just for this script, only for what I've seen, only for the past 24 hours. So if execution log is blank here, doesn't necessarily mean it's not running. It could mean that it didn't run. It could mean that in this case, the log level is only telling me errors. So it might be running all the time, but it never has errors. It's not showing anything. Or it could mean it ran yesterday and not today. So the server script logs search is a little better in that you can you can sweep through. Again, I've seen approximately a month-ish. And obviously it's a safe search, so you can do a lot of magic here. So the magic that I've liked to do with the server script logs is, I will log things in very specific ways as a developer, and then I use the search to cherry pick pieces out, like invoice numbers or things like that, so that I can export that to CSV and use it easier for troubleshooting. So logs are something worth knowing about. If it's one of the other things you can learn in this talk, I hope you do, is that there are these things called logs. Server script logs is a good place. There's a great search I'm going to show you at the end that I use all the time. There's actually two of them. And one of them is related to server script logs. It's really handy. And I think that's what we talk about next. Okay, so the execution log subtab. So we looked at that. So very often as a developer, we use this. So you go to the script record or the script deployment record, you click execution log. There's this button here that you might see called remove all. That does what it sounds like. That actually removes the log records for this script or the script deployment. So you might ask, like, why would you do that? And the answer is, as a developer, it's actually really handy, and as an administrator, it could be too. If you know you want to run a script, and the only logs you want to look at are for the run that you're gonna do, then click remove all. It'll clean out all the logs for just this script. Then you run your script. Then you could do a server script log search for your particular script, and everything is just the run that you just did. So that's actually a handy button. It sounds scary, and it's not as scary as it sounds. And be aware that, again, execution log is only a 24-hour window. Server script log we talked about. Let's see. So because it's a search, you can email these things. So that'll be one of the ones I show you. It can be set up as a portlet. So I'll show you that. I actually use that myself. So I have this portlet I created called recent script errors. And it's a search of server script logs grouped by, I think I grabbed the first, like, I don't know, 25 characters or something like that. I just grab the first 25 and then group up, count how many of that particular type. And then I get the script IDs and sort by the count. So this is a good, and our errors are pretty messy right now. It's one of the things that I'm hoping we can get through this year. But it is a really good way of seeing, like, are there any scripts that are crying in the dark for help? Because one thing worth noting with these script logs is, as a developer, typically when you see that there's a problem, you log an error. So you create a log of type error, and you typically give information in there like, hey, I couldn't do blah because of blah. Whereas a NetSuite administrator, if you didn't even know these logs existed, you would have no idea the error was happening, and you definitely wouldn't know why it was happening. All you would know is that your invoice records aren't updating, or some of them aren't updating. So with these server script logs, you can search, just show me the errors, and you could be very surprised. You could be like, oh, that's why this particular invoice didn't update, because in this log, the code is trying to tell me that it couldn't update because it doesn't have an address subrecord or whatever the, the reason is. So that alone is a really valuable reason for these server script logs. And again, on the portlets, this is a really good one to have, is all errors, count them, grab the first, you can count them by script. You can figure out what works for you of how you group them, but group them, count them, and sort by the top offender on top. And it gives you an idea of like which scripts are having problems. And then of course, with the saved search, you can email those as well, which I don't do with our log searches. Typically do the portlet. So recent script errors we just looked at. This is actually what my search looks like for that recent script error. So it's super simple. It's a server script log search. The criteria type is error. And in results, I sort by the date in descending order so that it's the most recent errors on top. And again, it's about 30 days. Yeah, and this is for the recent script errors detail. So what you saw in my portlet was a summary search. This one is more of like, just give me all the details. This is also a good one if you are an admin and you have a developer and they can't figure out what's going on. I mean, this sounds almost obvious, but a lot of developers are this way. I've been this way in my past as well. Is you're pretty sure you know what the problem is, but you actually didn't go and look through the logs for errors. So as an admin or a manager of developers, it is good to go and look at the errors and ask your devs, like, hey, what is this? What does this mean? If you have third parties writing scripts for you, custom scripts for you, you can ask them that, like, why is it logging this error? And if they're like, oh, it's not an error, then why did you log it as an error? Like, why didn't you just give it as an informational? You can ask questions like that and kind of help refine, what is this script actually doing? So this recent script errors can help you with that. All right, so this is probably one of my absolute most favorite searches. Recently changed scripts. So this is, did one of my scripts change and who changed it? Because when you have either multiple developers and or third parties in your system who could be or could not be changing scripts, if you don't have this answer, basically the way you find out if a script changed is, you do a month-end close and rev rec dates aren't there or something crazy like that. You're just like, what happened? And then it's just, NetSuite doesn't really have a good change control, really any change control for scripts, so it becomes very challenging. This is a search I came up with. It's kind of, I'm using a little regex thing in here for the criteria, but it works. So this is a search that basically searches the file cabinet, if I'm not mistaken here. No, it's a system note search. It turns out that there's in system notes there's this file content hash property. So anytime that any file is changed in the file cabinet, the file content hash gets changed. So this leverages that. It says, oh, okay, I just want to look for files that the name of the file ends in a .js, which tells me it's probably SuiteScript. And this is kind of the same. No, really, it ends in a JS. And it was changed today, and I know it was changed because the file content hash changed. This has been super valuable. So it's valuable because, like, when a bundle updates, how many of you have had bundles that updated automatically? They're managed bundles, and they changed, and you had no idea because they're managed. This script will find that. You'll get an email at the end of the day that says, bing, these scripts changed. And you say, huh, what are those scripts? Well, when you search the script, it gives you a bundle ID, and you'll know, like, oh, okay, well, FAM updated or whatever the bundle is. Or if you have custom scripts, you'll get an email, like, because I have this runs on a daily email for me. So you'll get an email that says, bing, these scripts changed, and you'll be like, huh, who changed that script? I'm pretty sure it actually shows who changed the script as well. So very, very valuable search for scripts. And the key thing to know here is it's a system note search. You're looking at the file content hash and for today. All right, so we're going to move on to kind of scripting related stuff, but that was kind of like the scripting as a big body of things. So now we're going to talk about
Mike,
other things. Oh, yeah.
There's a question in the chat window.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Thank you, Deborah. So how did I add this as a portlet? So I think you're referring to the recent script errors. So this was so it was a safe search. Some of y'all might have to help me here. So I added a portlet of type search, I believe, and then add this, I created a saved search called recent script error summary. And then in the portlet, I just pulled in that saved search.
Hey, Mike, she put the answer. She said she figured it out, but she said a custom search, if you want to look at the chat.
Okay, yes, I see it. Thank you. All right. All right, so other noteworthy items. So these are things as a manager or NetSuite admin, you might use some of these, but you may not. But if you have developers, they need to know what these are. So the first is the script performance monitor. So this is actually, I'm going to say, kind of new to NetSuite. They're improving it. It's fairly new. And it offers some decent insight as far as when did scripts run and how much time are they using? Are they using, what are they doing basically from all the time is being used by searches or, searches within the script or things like that. This is a free NetSuite bundle. And it just gives you an idea of which scripts are running, why would a script run slow? I am personally, this is not one of those tools I'm like, oh my God, I can't live without this tool. It's not one of those for me, but it's a go-to place that I go to if it feels like a script is running slow. So if you have issues where you have a script on your system and you know it's running slow, but you've never seen this bundle before, you probably want to install it and spend a couple hours looking through to see if this is giving you any information. I will say if you just install it and run it, I don't think it'll give you anything because it has to start gathering metrics. So I think that's one of those install it, let it run for a week or so, and then start looking through the historic data. So script performance monitor or application performance. Script debugger. So as a developer, as a NetSuite developer, this is you spend a lot of quality time in this screen. As a admin, you may have seen, I think we've done a tip and trick on this in the past, where if NetSuite has issues where you cannot log in, you can actually go to like debugger.netsuite.com or something like that, and it takes you to the same place. As a developer, typically to get here, you log into your instance and you go to page:/script debugger. And script debugger, the experience will take you to like this kind of cryptic looking page with a tiny little text that says, click here if you want to go to script debugger. And you click it, and now you're back in your NetSuite instance. I'll show you here. So like I am in our sandbox environment, and our URL is our instance. But if I go to page script debugger, it gives, again, this little cryptic page like, okay, what are you doing? And it's this tiny little font that says, click here to log into script debugger. Okay, I'm going to do that. And you wait. And now you're back in your instance. You're looking at this screen. You're still in your sandbox. So the important thing to know, oh, and also your URL changed. So I started in my sandbox environment. I went to page:/script debugger. I'm still in my sandbox environment. And what's worth noting is it is, for all intent purposes, I am still in NetSuite. I'm still in sandbox. I'm just in quote unquote debug mode. If you can think of it conceptually. So I can go to home, I can go to all the screens like normal. If I modify records, I'm modifying records. If I go up here and go to production, I will be in the production environment in the script in debug mode. So production also has a script debugger because a lot of us don't have sandbox environments, right? So script debugger is like a debug mode. Think of it as that, that you can use just like your normal instance. If you modify records, you're modifying the records. So what's different, Mike? Well, what's different is either in that, if you go from here, actually, if you go to script debugger and then again type page script debugger, instead of taking me to the cryptic page, it just takes me straight to the script debugger. And as a non-developer, it's like, what is this, right? Like, what do I do? So as an admin, really the way you would use this is a developer would say, hey, I got a script for you. You want to run it? And they'll tell you how to get to this page, and they'll say, just paste your text in here and click this button and let it do its thing. That's actually really valuable if you want to run what I would call an ad hoc script. So you want to run a script only once. It's really simple. You just do it once, just kind of throw it together. Script debugger is usually the place for that. So you would paste the script in here from like Notepad. You'd write it in Notepad and paste it in here. The other valuable, the more valuable place for script debugger, which is important for you to know as an admin, that your developers can do this, especially with mass update, scheduled, and most importantly, user event scripts, is you can go to script debugger and you can click debug existing. And this gives you a list of all scripts. If you remember earlier in the talk, a script deployment had this like mode to it that was either released or testing or not released. And I had said that like, well, if it's in testing mode, only the developer, only the person who owns the script can run it. That is true. But the other advantage to that mode is that if it's in testing mode and you own the script, it's going to show up when you click this debug existing. And when you click the debug existing, I'll just run this because I know it's not going to actually do anything. You click that and it says waiting for user action with the little spinny. So what you do now is say, cool, I know what to do. And you go in another tab and you go run that, like let's say it was a user event on an invoice. You go open the invoice. And what will happen is in this tab, all the code will show up and there will be a line that highlights and says, oh, okay, you're here. You're on this line of code. What do you want to do next? And you start clicking these buttons like, okay, go run the next line of code, run the next one, run the next one, run the next one. And down here, you can see if it's logging anything, and you can see this is really valuable, this local variables. You can see, oh, yep, it just loaded my invoice. Let me click it and break it down, and I can see all the properties of the invoice. Super, super valuable. So the thing to know as an admin is if you have a developer who's writing a script for you and the script's having issues, does your developer know how to use script debugger? If they don't, just have them spend a day just learning that because it'll save so much time. That's really kind of the take home there on script debugger. All right. Does not work with MapReduces. So that's a real bummer with MapReduces is you can't use script debugger. And let's see, you can use ad hoc. So Bruno, I see you had a question. Let's see. Can you run an instance of your favorite search? Curious on what the output looks like and the results section. So Bruno, I think I've actually got two favorite searches, but I think you're talking about the recently changed SuiteScripts. Is that maybe what you're asking about? I will see. Yeah. I'm going to search my inbox and see, because if I run it today, it's going to come up blank. But here's one I received actually just yesterday. Open a new window. So this was the recently changed SuiteScript's favorite search. So this sent me and other people, I like it for an audit trail. And as a rule of thumb, I usually put the search name in the title of the email. But this basically said, hey, these JavaScript files changed yesterday. And I already know from the naming convention, like, oh, these are probably from a bundle, but I could, click into them or search that particular JS and it would give me the bundle ID and I would be like, oh, that's from the whatever. I don't remember what RA is, so I don't know what this one is. I know CS would be a client script typically. But this is what my favorite search would send. It would send, this tells me it was changed by account provisioning, so that also tells me it was a bundle update. Typically, if David, our developer, changes something, I would see his name there. Or if I change something, I'd see my name there. And it tells you when it changed. So when it changed is really valuable because if you're troubleshooting, like, why did RevRec days suddenly not start showing up on invoices? When did this happen? This could give you an actual date and time where you could say, like, from this date forward, at this time forward, that's when the bug was introduced. Also gives you the, if you're dealing with third-party vendors and they introduce the bug, when they introduce the fix, you would see the same email come back and you'd be like, okay, well, at least it changed something. Good question, Bruno. Okay, so we covered script debugger, SDF projects. I'll go just very briefly and lightly, but NetSuite introduced this concept called SDF. I think it's Software Development Framework. The page worth noting, which is really interesting, is, well, so step back. SDF is a way to kind of package software and deploy it into your NetSuite system, kind of like a bundle, a lot like a bundle, actually. And this page called Deployment Audit Trail is one worth noting. So if your developers are using SDF, which hopefully they are, but it's still got some struggles to using it the way it should be. But if they are, what you'll find in page called Deployment Audit Trail is every time they pushed code into your system, you'd see a log, who did it, when they did it, and if it failed or succeeded. In an ideal world for every developer, you would never drop stuff in the file cabinet. You would always do an SDF deployment. And the reason being is that there's this audit trail. Like you could clearly audit, you would know what got pushed in and when it got pushed in. So just to let you know, as admins of your NetSuite systems, this page exists. I hope as time progresses, this will become more important for any sort of code releases of custom code. All right, script caveats and limitations. All right, so a couple of these. Here we go. The top one, tippy top for all NetSuite developers, because it's just, oh my God, it's what every NetSuite developer pulls their hair out about. And if you're not a dev, you're just like, what are you talking about? Like, we're not in the 70s anymore, but sometimes it feels like we are on a mainframe. NetSuite has what are called script execution limits. So these are where if you run a script, as the script is running, NetSuite, the system basically counts. I'm kind of simplifying it, but it counts the number of things you're doing. And it also watches its stopwatch, and it triggers on one of two things. It either says you've done enough things, I'm stopping you right now, or it triggers and says you've been running for too long, I'm stopping you. Super frustrating because the limits are not exactly long. So in the context of like a user event script or I think mass update scripts as well, and suitelets as well, they're, you know, when you start iterating on a saved search and wanting to do something, you start hitting these limits. MapReduces are special children that they have the limits, but they're much more reasonable. So again, if you need a script to manipulate data, MapReduces are usually the first go-to for that. But be aware, there are these limits. You can't change them. The other thing to be aware of with the limits is that NetSuite doesn't count every single thing your script does. So this is important from a, I don't know, like a developer and managing a developer perspective. You know, some developers think that they try and write super fancy code that's impossible to read because they think it's faster. And what NetSuite actually counts isn't how fancy your code is or how like you do a loop one way or another, or you do an if condition with a question mark versus saying if this, then that. What NetSuite counts is how many times did you run a search? How many times did you save a record? How many times did you load a record? You know, things that would affect basically the database. Those are the things that impact the script execution limits. Caveats and limits. So we've talked about the sequencing of user events. So this was under page called scripted records. The things on top run first, the things on the bottom run last. You can, I didn't show this, but if you click edit, you can click and drag these and move them around so you can change the sequence. It's the only place you can change the sequence is in the scripted records, edit, and click and drag these around. Be aware the scripts call scripts. I think we talked about that earlier. So primarily your user event scripts can be called if like your MapReduce saves a record. And sometimes you actually want that, sometimes you don't. Just be aware it can happen. There are things you can do inside of your user event to say, don't run if I think I'm being called from another script. Sequencing of scripts versus workflows. I'm going to be honest, I don't know this one very well because you might ask, like, I've got scripts and I have workflows, and there are two different tabs on scripted records. Which ones run first? I don't know the answer to that. So if somebody here smarter than me does know that, maybe post in the chat. The audit trail of changes. So when you change a script, you know, I showed you my favorite search for showing you that something changed, but it doesn't tell you what the changes were. NetSuite really doesn't have a great audit trail for changing scripts. Developers are typically used to a system called Git, G-I-T, which gives you extremely detailed change, you know, what you changed and when and why and who changed it. NetSuite doesn't have that, unfortunately. The best practice we use at Vertafore, we modify all of our scripts and commit them into Git. And then we go through a whole QA, UAT, and all that process. And once it's ready to release, then we release from our Git repository into NetSuite. It's basically a manual release. Logging of script activities we talked about a little earlier. So you will see in system information on your records that scripts do log things. So the scripts don't always log things though, so be aware of that. SuiteScript 1 is very different from 2.0. We didn't cover it here, but just be aware they're very different animals. You can't just, it's basically a rewrite to go from 1 to 2. And then the CSV import checkbox, when your users do a CSV import or there's a little checkbox under Advanced that says Run Server SuiteScripts and Workflows. If you uncheck that, that means user event scripts will not run. And there's nothing you can do about it as a developer. So it's a very sharp knife and important thing to know about. All right, Gavin, I'm sorry I ran a little bit late here, but I'm almost done. So as far as getting more help, if you are interested in developing or have a developer on staff, the NetSuite user guide for the SuiteScript developer guide is really a good read. NetSuite help for SuiteScript 2.0 is also a great place. It's my normal reference when I want to start, I actually go straight to modules, but NetSuite help gives developers a good, how do I call this particular function and parameters, all that. And then of course the NetSuite professional Slack channel or Slack forum, there's a specific channel called SuiteScript, and there are some incredibly intelligent people on that channel who can answer questions as well. All right, that is it for scripting for non-scripters. For those of y'all going for your CPE credits, your checkout keyword is trees. If anybody has questions, I know Gavin's going to be doing a talk here soon. So if anybody has questions, feel free to put those in the chat.
Yes, thank you, Mike. And we can address any of those questions during the open forum if anything comes up. So thank you very much. That was a great presentation. And we'll go ahead and switch over to Gavin Davidson of NetSuite, and he's going to go through our 2020.2 updates. So just a minute, Gavin, and I will make you presenter.
Excellent.
If I can find you in my list, there you are. All right, thanks for being here with us today, Gavin. We really appreciate it, and I'll let you take it away.
No worries. You can see my screen okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah, and just let's see, do this. Just on the scripting thing, I actually did a few years ago, many years ago actually. I assume it's still available. There's a NetSuite has like a scripting SuiteScript class or a course that you can do, and even if you're a non-scripter like me, my background is more database and SQL and that sort of thing, so I just know some basic stuff. But as you go through the session, they actually have all of the sample scripts at the end of each chapter. So you can basically go and you can copy and paste the scripts into the window, and then make some changes to them just to figure out how they work, that sort of thing. So it's really good exercise to go through. You learn a lot about how the system works in the background, that sort of thing. So just thought I would pass that on. Okay. So let's go and go through some updates on what's happening in the .2 release, which a lot of you probably have already. And I will. This is me. This is I think the third or fourth time probably I've talked to you guys. So glad to be back again. I've been with NetSuite for 10 years now. I actually had my 10th anniversary like a couple of weeks ago. I joined NetSuite as a solution consultant doing demos, and then moved on to a number of different roles. Ran the manufacturing vertical for a while globally, and ended up in product marketing, and now I'm in the vertical product management team. So the vertical team, we go to market by industry or vertical. So it's basically our job to try and make sure that the industries get the features that they need to be successful. So quick safe harbor statement. There's probably a couple of things in here that are futures, so won't dwell too much on that. A couple of things I like to talk about as well. This is really something I'm quite passionate about, is making sure that that the customers know what the great features that we're releasing actually are. So we've released NetSuite in phases. Phase 0 is basically just NetSuite. So we run NetSuite ourselves, of course, and so we upgrade ourselves first. And then there's 3 customer phases after that, and the breakdown is roughly 10%, 30%, 60%. Most customers are in phase 3, of course, and then depending on your level of service, you might have the option to choose which phase that you actually upgraded. The other thing that's interesting, though, is that sometimes bundles and platform solutions are not released until after phase 3 has been released. And that's basically so that we can make sure that everyone's code is at the right level and working the way it should be. And so some of the optional modules, so for example, the quality management tablet, that sort of thing, oftentimes those are released after the third phase. Sometimes they're not, but that's one thing to look for. Of course, there's sneak peeks. This is one of the things I help create, picking the top features and then organizing them into different documents. There's the new release portlet you should have in your dashboard, and that gives you, again, we pick a few different themes and talk about some of the things that have changed in the product. And of course, if you want more information, you can get, there's overviews, there's your user group, of course. There's your release preview login, we'll talk about that in a second. Release notes, sneak peeks, etc., and suite answers. And then we also do blogs. We used to do videos highlighting some of the new features, and so now we try and put them into more context by industry. And so we have a number of different blogs that we release. And we also put some other training videos, etc., in Suite Answers. So lots of places you can go and get that. The most important thing is the release preview account. We used to upgrade everyone. We used to give everyone a release preview account automatically. We stopped doing that because something like 85% of customers do not even log into the release preview account. Which is kind of shocking. So I would encourage you to now request your release preview account. It's basically a free sandbox. If you want to try some stuff out in it twice a year, then you can use it for that. And there's also, we actually also publish test plans and suggest recommended test plans. So basically to give you an idea of the things that you should be testing to make sure that everything's working appropriately. Okay, enough of that stuff. Let's talk about some of the features. Margie actually pinged me the other day, and she's like, "Can you just talk about stuff that's free and included for everybody?" And we organize these decks kind of in the order of what we think is the most important. But I will try and point out as we go through this things that are free and most of these things I'm going to show you are not things that you're going to have to pay more for. Most of them are upgrades to existing functionality. So let's start with, of course, my personal favorite product industries. I do represent manufacturing, distribution, food and beverage. And but this is really beyond that. We released the demand planning solution, I think about 8 years ago. And it's been something that's not really been adopted and used as much as we'd like. This is something that we actively track in the system. And so we basically completely rewrote the supply side of demand planning. So if if anyone has demand planning and they're not using it, we know there's a lot of you out there, or you tried to use it in the past and it wasn't doing what you're looking for, or you were struggling with limits around number of items or transactional volume, that sort of thing. This is something for you. It's not anything that's extra. It's if you have demand planning, and a lot of the editions have that included now anyway. And it's again a complete rewrite of the supply side. So we've not done anything on the demand side. Demand is still coming from sales orders, that sort of thing. And the actual demand plans you create, the way you do that has not changed. That's something we're going to focus on shortly. But everything on the supply side, so creating supply plans and actions, exceptions, the way that you approve those, etc. There's an all-new planning repository that basically gives you stores all the information, and there's also a new thing called the Planner's Workbench, which where you can go and you'll see all the information that all the orders that it's telling you have to go and make, change, move, that sort of thing. So we're super excited about this. We've got really good feedback already from the customer base. We actually hired somebody from Oracle, a product manager from Oracle 3 years ago, who was familiar with their MRP system. So this is a much more traditional MRP approach, and we're super excited for customers to use it. So please go and check that out. Invoice grouping. So this is not consolidated invoicing, even though it says consolidated at the top. It is invoice grouping. It only works right now with invoices that are generated as a result of a sales order. That's going to be fixed in the next release. But basically, this is an example of, we do actually pay attention to enhancement requests. This has been a top enhancement request for as long as I've been here. And it's a really complex thing to solve because everyone wants to do this in different ways. We know this isn't perfect, but this is good enough to get this out there. This is, again, just a bundle you can install or a feature you enable. And so it's not something you pay extra for. So basically what happens is you turn this on, you then have to go and opt customers into grouping. And then any sales order that's created after that point, those invoices from those sales orders will be eligible for grouping. So basically you go to the screen, you can do it by customer or do it across all customers, and choose the sales orders you want to, or the invoices you want to group together. It still technically creates individual invoices, but then it creates a group invoice that you can submit to your customer, and if they pay it, then the payments are automatically dispersed to the individual invoices. So definitely something we think is going to help. The quality management app, and so this has been out for a few years now. We keep on adding new stuff to it. The biggest thing this time around is that you can actually now do inspections on shipments, and you can do customer or location specific inspection plans. So if you have a customer, different customers who have different requirements in terms of how you inspect their product before it's shipped, then you can use that. You can choose at what point the inspection gets tied in. And there's also been some enhancements around handling high volumes as well, so you can import CSV files. And we also are just releasing an update to this that's going to make the processing the inspections a lot faster. That's not technically part of the release. It's just something that we did within the last week or so.
Gavin,
yes.
Gavin, there are a couple questions about the
Sure.
Invoice grouping, like
Yeah.
whether what the difference is between that and consolidated invoicing, and also is there a cost for invoice grouping bundle?
No
is it a
cost.
bundle, and does it require implementation?
No cost. It's just I think it's just a feature that you enable. So true consolidated invoicing would not create individual invoices. It would create one. It would take all your sales orders and then create one consolidated invoice that then links back to those sales orders. So this still technically creates individual invoices. It just lets you then go and create a group invoice. It's a very they're similar but not the same. And no, again, it's something that's free. It should be available to just to enable in the in your enable features area. Okay, so for those of you with WMS, we've now removed the requirement that you use bins. So you can now use WMS in a NetSuite location that doesn't have bins enabled. So this might apply to smaller warehouses or even some larger warehouses if you're not tracking anything else in NetSuite in there, and also retail stores. So retail stores, small warehouses, that sort of thing. It just makes it simplifies the process. You don't have to go and establish bins and pick a bin. It cuts down an extra step and just makes it a little bit easier to use. And that's again just an upgrade to the existing WMS. On the services industry, there's some new standard project manager notifications. So for missing actual time to approve, expenses to approve, and just gives the project manager a little bit more visibility into what's going on with some of the issues with their projects. There's some new budget templates and revenue calculations, and this is all tied into the new work breakdown structure. And this basically just lets the project manager save a lot of time in terms of how they enter budgets, and I guess the projects. Again, it's all tied into the work breakdown structure feature that was, I think, it's been out for a couple of releases now. So there is, or we actually use now Oracle's Content Experience Cloud internally for sharing documents. And we've now created a Suite app that lets customers use that as well. The first release of that is really focused around projects, so linking documents to projects and then sharing them, that sort of thing. Very similar to what Box does, that sort of thing. And you'll see this rolled out to other parts of the system shortly as well. For non-profit companies, the first part of balancing segments for fund accounting. So this is a multi-phase release. There's another phase coming out in the next release, I think. So basically lets you auto balance account entries across multiple dimensions or segments, and you can balance right now up to 2 segments. So again, there's further functionality coming in this area shortly. Payroll allocations, again, this is to do with fund accounting, and just allows nonprofit organizations to allocate payroll costs by programs, projects, grant segments, that sort of thing, and just again, just automates a lot of the existing processes. Global financials. There's a few examples you're starting to see of us using more Oracle technology. So the Oracle Content Experience Cloud, and also you've seen some of the AI machine learning stuff we've done in the supply chain side. We have now started to use that in the global financials as well. And basically what this is going to do is it's going to learn common transaction types it sees through bank imports, and then you can choose which one should be automatically created. So that will save a little bit of time in the accounting and bank rec process. Intercompany, this is going to be an ongoing development process, really automating intercompany processes, and this just is automating cross charges. And so there's a new cross charge workbench that you can use. So that's going to really help with the period close process. And again, a new screen for netting AR and AP. The other thing you'll notice here is kind of interesting is if you see this screen and there's you're trying to do a side-by-side comparison, and so it's showing you the AR and AP side by side. That's an example of every time we release a new feature now, we have a really extensive user experience team, and they basically will design unique UI elements like this for a specific use case. So if they're talking to users and they're saying, I need to be able to see this and this at the same time, or whatever feedback they're getting, if we don't have that type of UI element, they don't go and create it. And so we're building a library of UI elements that we can then use for other purposes. So again, this is just something that's going to help with that process, but a little bit of background as to what we're doing in the UI side. And user experience in general has been a big focus for us for a while now, and you're going to continue to see that happening. Be able to receive products across subsidiaries, again, an important thing for anyone that has multiple subsidiaries. And then there's also this suite approvals now applies to the vendor prepayments. Expense, there's Amex credit card integration for expense reports. So again, if you're using Amex cards with your employees, then that's going to automate some of those expense reporting processes. And then you can go in and also enforce policies. So then the system will identify when expenses are outside of policy. On the Suite People side, this is actually something that is extra. This is not part of the base Suite People solution, but there's a new performance management tool. So basically it lets you go and establish whatever your goals for the year are, and then it actually manages the whole review process. So first of all, you go and set up your goals. The nice thing about this is that you can actually tie your goals to specific metrics in NetSuite. So if you want to have a goal based on shipping 500 packages a day, or you meet your quota for the month, that sort of thing, then you can set those as goals and tie those, and those will be automatically updated when the system reaches that mark. So basically, it's just a way to go and establish your goals, and then when it comes to review time, managing that review process with your manager in the system. So you can rate yourself, the manager can rate you, then you can get together and discuss what it looked like overall. And then there's also with payroll, there's some enhancements around direct deposit and how you can go and set up the employers can go and set up their direct deposit accounts, and they can set up to 10 different accounts for themselves. And then any variable pay, so bonuses, commissions, that sort of thing, you'll now see those on the employee timeline. Just makes it a little bit easier to see what's happening with an employee over time. And there's also employee change requests, and there's a couple of different ways that they might go and do that. And then there's also manager approvals involved. So depending how you want to use this, it could be, for right now, it's for promotions, so apply for a new job, transfers to another location or another position, and then if they want to request a base pay change, we'll be able to put someone wants to request a decrease, who knows. On the platform side, you might have noticed this, there's a Suite App Marketplace, so you can go and browse both NetSuite and partner Suite apps. Depending on permissions and how the Suite app is created, then in some cases you can actually go and deploy these Suite apps right from here as well. So an example of this was we released recently, or I think it was last release, we released the new bank communication tool and a bank integration tool, and that's available through the Suite App Marketplace. So you're going to see more product options, whether they're free or paid, and whether they're NetSuite or partner driven, being made available too. So basically just like an app store for NetSuite. Some updates to the application performance management. I know you guys were just talking about that earlier. I'd highly recommend that you check this out if you have scripts involved. Other scripts or partners or even workflows, just make sure that everything's running the way that it should do. And in some cases, even some really complex saved searches. And then the concurrency monitor will help identify where there's capacity problems when you have too many processes running at once. There's also a records catalog. So we used to have a record browser, but so that's been updated. So there's now a records catalog and will include custom records in your account. So it gives you a much more complete view of what your system looks like and how it's all tied together. You're going to see more of this. This isn't being released yet. We've again, Oracle has this integration cloud product, OIC, and NetSuite is going to start releasing our own integrations to different solutions. The first one that we're working on is Salesforce. It's actually complete. We're just waiting on getting approval from Salesforce as a partner to be able to go and deploy this. There are other ones coming up shortly that you're going to see, so stay tuned for that. And it's very competitively priced as well. And I think that's it. Let's go see if there's any more questions. If we can find the chat, there we go. Marjorie, I see you've been answering some questions. Is there anything in here that's not been answered yet that you need some help on?
Yes, I was just guessing. Someone was asking about the Amex corporate card integration suite app that they couldn't find. Is that going to be, do they have to wait till they're upgraded to 2020.2?
Yeah, they'll have to be in 20.2 before they see that, yeah. Okay. Again, it should be and it should be in the release preview, but again, the caveat I mentioned earlier around Suite apps, sometimes Suite apps are not made available until after phase 3. So if you are upgraded or you have a release preview and you're still not seeing it, then just reach out to your account manager and ask about it, and they can, I'm sure they will be able to find out more. One other thing I wanted to mention, of course, Suite World, as we know, didn't happen, and I'm not sure what's going to happen next year at this point either. Stay tuned. There is going to be an online Suite World-esque event shortly. So you're going to get a keynote by Evan and Gary. You're going to see me possibly in some of those keynotes, and if not, I'm working in the background on the keynote for supply chain management. So there's about 5 or 6 weeks of content, I believe, starting in October, early October-ish, and it's going to all be online, so you'll be able to. And a lot of what we also did, we picked about 7 to 10 Suite World sessions that we're going to run, and we are going to present those, and you'll be able to ask questions live as well. So look out for that. If you've not seen anything about it, I know there's some marketing events happening shortly. So if it's not come out yet, then you're the first ones to know about it. There you go.
Gavin, we do have a couple other questions.
Sure.
First question is regarding group invoicing. Is that available now in the, if you have the pre-release to be able to play with that?
Should be. Okay,
is there I guess this probably came from someone that doesn't have a pre-release version. Right. Is there a demo? Do you know if there's a little video of it on Suite Answer?
I don't know for sure, but there probably is. So I would check out Suite Answers first, yeah.
And then another question that came in is, does the real-time bi-directional interface with Salesforce replace the need for third-party integration like Celico?
It sure could do, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's you know, we think that Oracle's done a pretty good job with this integration cloud. They have priced it very competitively to other products in the market. So we've worked on Salesforce, we're working on Shopify, we're working on a couple of other ones as well, and there's some things that they're doing around licensing for it that makes it very, very attractive. So yeah, there should be more integrations coming out based on that same platform.
Okay, question on the records browser. Is that supposed to the records catalog, is that supposed to replace the records browser? This is coming from me.
Yes.
And right now, like looking at a customer, all it shows is just the high level in the release preview. It doesn't show all the detailed records below. Is it because they're not quite there yet? I looked at that and I looked at the employee record, customer and employee, and it's just not there.
I don't know. That's good. That's a good one. It should show all the detail. Maybe it's not being quite updated yet. There is a difference between the release preview as well and the actual release upgrade.
Okay.
So if it's not there, if it's still doing the same thing after you're upgraded, then let me know, and I will do some more digging and get you an answer.
Okay, another question from Alex. Do any of the new project management features need to be enabled, or are they enabled at the time of update?
I think they're enabled at the time of update.
Okay. From Matthew, do you have a timeline? What?
I think they're just new features. They're not. I don't think any of them are enableable, if you know what I mean. But
okay. Do you have a timeline on the bi-directional interface with Shopify?
I would say so. We have it works. I would say this first thing I would say, and we have a meeting next week to go through it with some other teams internally. In order to get certified, we have to do something with there's something that weird that they do with gift cards in Shopify. And so we have to do something around, we have to figure out something around that. So I would say it's close, it won't be there, it won't be available. Actually, we are actually looking for customers to be early adopters. So if anyone's interested in that, they can ping me, gdavidson@netsuite.com, because Oracle's looking for about 10 customers to be involved. And there's like a reduced fee for it's free during the process. I think there's a reduced fee for the first year or something after that. So I can send you some more details if anyone's interested.
Okay. Also, are you going to be looking at a bi-directional interface for BigCommerce?
I've not seen that one specifically. What I would say is that longer term, if you get something, if you use one of the standard integrations, then you also would have the ability to use OIC just like a regular integration tool to any other system. So I know we have a backlog of products to do integrations to. I've not seen BigCommerce specifically be one of those. So I would say no. At this point, I've not heard that one, and I know there's a backlog of like 8 or 10 products that they're looking at right now.
Okay, there are no more questions at this time.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Gavin.
My pleasure. And again, if anyone's interested in Shopify, just email me, gdavidson@netsuite.com, and I will put you in touch with the right people.
Can you please post that email address, because you have a Canadian accent?
I could.
Or just on chat, you mean?
Yes, on chat.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's kind of complicated. Hold on a second.
Or I can post it, but I have a different email address. I think I have, let me see.
I'll get it. I'll post it.
Okay,
gdavidson@netsuite.com.
Okay.
Got it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, just email me there. And if anyone has any questions that they didn't want to ask, or anything else about the new release, or anything that I mentioned today, or didn't, and you want to know why I didn't mention it, then feel free. I'm usually quite friendly, right, Margie? And
Usually
quite friendly. And I'm happy to. My biggest asset at NetSuite these days, honestly, is having been here 10 years, is if I don't know the answer, I know who to go and ask. And so feel free to ask, and I'll try and help out if I can.
excellent. Thank you, Gavin. We really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, no worries. How to do it?
Margie, are you ready to do your tip and trick?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
So is it okay to keep going, or do people need a break?
Let's just keep going. We're a little
Almost
over,
there.
so let's just keep going, and yeah, we should be good.
Okay. Did you share my screen?
You should be able to click the share screen at the bottom, but I can.
Hang on, I got to get out of this. Screen, share. Okay.
There you go.
All right. You can see my screen and you can hear me, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so what I'm talking about today, my name is Margie, and you know who I am. I'm on the board. I am a NetSuite administrator, and I can do everything like workflows and customizations, but what I am not is a scripter. So I just wanted to make that clear up front. I can hack a script and add a couple lines and modify one, but that's sort of the extent of it. So what I'm going to be talking about today probably relates to all of you who aren't scripters. Those of you that are, you might not be aware of what I'm going to call SuiteQL. And this is what I'm going to be talking about today. So if you aren't aware of it as scripters, this will be very beneficial for you. For those of you that aren't scripters like myself, I still think you'll be able to take advantage of it. And there's this really cool little interface that you'll be able to implement on your side. So what is SuiteQL? SuiteQL, as opposed to NightQuil, will keep you awake. It actually is another query language. So you're going like, what? All right, there are saved searches, the reports, there's Suite Analytics, and now we have another way to query the database? Yes, but there's a very specific use for this, and we're going to be talking about that now. And it is not an add-on module. If you can write SuiteScript within your modules, within your implementation, you already have access to this. So just want to take you back because this is called SuiteQL, standing for Suite Query Language. So in the beginning, there was SQL. Basically, in 74, IBM created this query language. And then in 79, it was implemented by Oracle Corporation and changed to SQL, Structured Query Language. So you might hear it called SQL or SQL, referred to, it's the same name. It's the same product, or I should say it's the same ability to query. So it was a de facto standard, and now it is a standard. What SQL provides, it's a common data manipulation language. So it's implemented by every major database. So I don't care if you're running on Access database, SQL Server, an IBM database, Informix, or Oracle, which being NetSuite, you run on an Oracle database. It is the same from language to language. There's always going to be nuances, but this is just a simple example saying this is sort of the format. You'd select your column names from a table, and then you could have where conditions, you could have order by, you can have all sorts of things implemented in addition. The beauty of it is that if you know SQL from one environment, from one life, past life, then you'll be able to use it within NetSuite. So I used to program in SQL many years ago when I worked for Oracle, and I actually taught SQL prior to that for another database company. So SuiteQL, it's NetSuite's version of SQL, and it's usually used by those writing SuiteScript, but you'll see how you'll be able to use it yourself in just a few minutes. So these are just some examples that I cut and paste from the online system that's showing how you can see where it says select, and then it has what fields you want, and then from a table, where, order by, etc. So It is very simple to use. It is not a compiled language, and it's just another way of querying the database. And it actually supports querying the analytics data source. And then you're going, what the heck is the analytics data source? Well, if you're using Suite Analytics, you are accessing the analytics data source. So the information in there is the same information that you can access using SuiteQL. So it's currently available using Suite Analytics Connect, which is an add-on product, the nQuery module in SuiteScript, and SuiteTalk REST Web Services API. So you can see this just recently came out, and it's fairly new for NetSuite to have exposed this. So I'm going to go ahead and do a demonstration of it, not this kind of a demonstration. So let's go ahead and pull over into my Sandbox account here. And I'm going to show you how to run this. So basically I have, and this is what you're going to be able to do at the end of all this. I have this SuiteQL under the custom. I bring that up. And then I can just take.
Hey, Margie, sorry to interrupt here. This is
Yes.
a great example, everybody, of a Suitelet script type.
Yes. Thank you, Mike. And also, I'm going to defer to Mike if there's questions, or defer to Mike if I say something completely wrong, since I am not a scripter. So here's a very, oh, I don't think we want that. Here is a very simple script that I'm going to run, just selecting this, this field from the employee table, where I'm just going to show the first 5 where the employees are currently active. I run this query, and you can see it gives me these results, and also gives the results in JSON. I don't know what JSON is, but I know it's something that scripters use, and something that's used when you're going between systems, between like a NetSuite system and a third-party system. So, but this is just showing you how simple this is, and this is what I'm going to be showing you how we actually implement this Suitelet. So here I can show you quickly another one. This one actually takes information from the transaction database. But if we go back to this first one that I showed you here, what I want to show you is that I'm going to show you how this relates to the Suite Analytics data source. So if we go into here, this is the employee database. So what I did is, all I did was take the entity ID and the is inactive, and I'm showing it here. If I select this, you can see that suddenly you're seeing information about the entity ID. You're seeing that it's a text. You're seeing that the internal ID is very similar. It just doesn't have a blank. And is inactive, you can see that it is a, the field is called is inactive. It's a Boolean because it's a checkbox. So it gives information. So this is basically your data dictionary. So what NetSuite is saying is that for SuiteQL, everything that you want to see can be found here. This is the same thing that you would find if you were to look in the employee record in the browser, the analytics browser, which is basically the same thing. We've always had the record browser, but now there's another tab called Analytics Browser. So basically, NetSuite is saying we're standardizing on this. So if you want to look at any kind of a record, it'll show you the label, and it'll show you what the internal ID is. So this is what you would drag and drop from a GUI in it, Suite Analytics, and this is what the internal ID is. Same thing as if you click on the field in a form and you say field level help, if you have internal ID to be displayed and have that checked in your setup, this is the same ID that will show. In addition, it shows you what other records or what other tables you can join to, and what that join field is, which is what we call a primary ID. So you can see over here, it tells you, is this available via the UI workbook? That means the Suite Analytics. Or is it available via SuiteScript, SuiteTalk, REST Web Services, basically, and the Connect, which is the add-on module that you have to pay for. If it says yes here, you can access this through SuiteQL. So here you can see, you see the same thing with the fields, the SuiteScript, the Connect. So I just wanted to kind of show you the relationship in case you want to play with this tool and you're a little bit overwhelmed going, well, where do I find this information? How do I learn it? How do I go about running some of these? But the beauty of this is if you're an administrator or a developer, you may already know SQL. So you can just easily transfer that knowledge over to here. So going back to the presentation, I just threw this in. This is more as a reference. I've already discussed this. This is giving you the link to the records browser, which is the Suite Analytics Data Dictionary, which is the analytics data source, and gives you information of what information you can see there. Here's some information about what experts are saying. Tim Dietrich is the person who created this SuiteLit that I'm going to be showing, and you all can implement yourself. And I just sort of underlined the key points here. You know, it's his preferred technique for integration projects. For Eric Brubaugh, who is from Stoic Software, who used to be on our board, he can write queries directly as SQL statements instead of using all the drop downs and drag and drop from the user interface. Oops. Sorry. Mike Kachline, who is the expert we just listened to, he's saying that this is a familiar and powerful mechanism for producing reports. So why am I bringing it up for non-scripters? Because if you know SQL and want to play with it, you too can run this without having to know SuiteScript, without having to buy Suite Analytics Connect. So this is thanks to Tim Dietrich, who posted a downloadable SuiteLit script last month in his blog. And to install and run Tim's SuiteLit, you can just go to this link, unzip the file, and then we do this simple 3-step process to implement it or bring it into NetSuite and actually be able to run the SuiteLit. So now I'm just going to show you, these are the steps you go through, but I'm going to actually go over to the sandbox and actually walk you through it. But at the end of this presentation, there are a lot of helpful resources. This is Tim Dietrich's blog. This is the link to the SuiteLit that I'm going to be showing. These are some Suite answers that you might want to look at. This is the link to the analytics browser. And eventually the records catalog will show this information, the same information that you see in the analytics browser. I'm currently in my sandbox and it's, in the pre-release and it's not showing it. This is Tim also highly recommended this book by Eric Brubaugh. There's also the Suite Analytics Workbook where you can see examples and actually just plug them in. And if you're totally unfamiliar with SQL, these are 2 links where you can actually learn about SQL. This Code Academy is actually what a lot of the middle school and high school kids are learning from, this Code Academy. So it's very simple, step-by-step and straightforward. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my environment over here, my release environment. By the way, here's the new records catalog that he talked about, and I'm not seeing any of the detail that he was showing on any of the records. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when we actually upgrade. So in order to take this SuiteLit, to get the SuiteLit to work in your environment, you just go to just customization, and then you go to scripting, scripts, new. And then you can just click on this to just, after you've downloaded it and zipped it, you can bring it in and notice it automatically will go into the SuiteScripts folder in your file cabinet. However, since I've already done this, I can actually go, it's already in my folder, in my file cabinet. I can just list here and I will scroll down to scripts, SuiteScripts. And from here, I can find this SuiteQL query tool and then create the script record. From here, I'm just going to say this is the SuiteQL script 3. And right now, I'm not going to put any description. There's nothing I want to put in here. Deployments, this is the title you're going to want to call it. So when I was in list and custom, and I have SuiteQL, this is what it's going to call it. So at this point, I'll just call this SuiteQL 3. I'm going to add that, and I've said it's deployed in testing mode. From here, I'm just going to say save and deploy. And from here, what it will do is it'll actually allow you to create a link. It allows you to say who can see this. It creates a link. You can add a link. Without this, you could just type it in your search bar and it would bring it up. But with this, it'll show it in one of the drop-down menus. So I'm going to go ahead and say this is the Classic Center. What section I want it in is lists, and I'll put it under customs, and I'm just going to call this SuiteQL again. And then I'm going to save it. Notice again, this is in testing, which means only you are going to be able to see this. And this is what I would, if you're just playing with it, I'd recommend you just have it in testing mode, unless you do want to, release it for any reason. So now I can go to lists. Let's go to lists, custom, and now you can see SuiteQL again. And it brings up the tool. Meanwhile, if I had typed in up here, SuiteQL, I think I said 3, this is another way I could have gotten directly to it. So that's what I wanted to show. Are there any questions about this that either I can answer or that Mike can answer? Let's see. Dylan says, how did you access this data? Oh, Mike already responded. Thank you, Mike, for responding to him.
Yep. Margie, just another couple of things to add on to this tool. So the JSON, there are actually, one of the things Margie, you didn't know this, but I kicked the tires on this tool like earlier this week too. And the one thing the tool doesn't do is export a CSV file. Right, so like when you get your results, you're like, how do I get this in Excel? Right, that's the first obvious question. So there's that window with JSON in it, and if you do a quick Google, you'll find that there are websites that can convert JSON into CSV. So basically that would be get all that JSON, select all, copy, paste into one of these website things, and it'll give you a CSV back. So that's
okay, thank you. Because what I was going to recommend, and I didn't actually say this, is that you can just, copy it, click, and then put it into Excel. But this, if you have a lot of data and thousands of rows, probably the best thing is to get find some free tool that will take it from JSON into a CSV. And maybe we can, Mike, maybe if you can find one, you can post it on our LinkedIn forum.
Okay. Yep. Trying to think of what else. Yeah, the only other thing I think, for everybody, how do I use SuiteQL? Why would I use this? I think SuiteQL, and it was, SuiteQL to me is like an extremely powerful tool that once it's in analytics as a workbook data set, which I think NetSuite's planning on doing, I'm not sure. I don't know if Gavin's on the phone still. It will be a complete game changer. So it's going to allow your, if you have, for instance, legacy systems, let's say you are on a legacy system and you have these reports and your business just lives and just like completely survives on these reports because they're simple but complex. Like the results are simple, but how to get to the data is like super complex and refined over the years. Those reports were written in SQL, And once SuiteQL comes into NetSuite, where you can really consume it well, you can get your developers and say, go rewrite the same report in SuiteQL. That'll be a game changer. You can have the same data show up in NetSuite.
Thank you, Mike. There was a question, does it have a record limit? There is a limit as far as in the results. I don't know if it's 10,000 or 100,000 characters, but there is a limit.
Yeah, so Devin, this is a great one, goes back on the SuiteScript. So this is a Suitelet that's running, which has 1,000 execution limit just on anything you run, so that'll be an issue. Here's what I would suggest though. So SuiteQL can be run in a script. If I had, a problem of like, hey, we got 10 million invoices, we got to crunch through them, bar none, I'd be using a MapReduce script. And MapReduce scripts can use SuiteQL. So you can actually write SuiteQL. What I would do as a developer in, your organization to recommend to them is write their SuiteQL in this little tool, but like just do a limit of like 10 or whatever, or 1,000, something where the query's right, you just don't have all the data. Take that limit off, put it in the MapReduce, and let the MapReduce crunch through all 10 million rows.
That's a really good idea. And that's just a simple row num, that's just a row num thing.
Yeah.
Row num is less than or equal to some number.
Yeah.
If there are no other questions, I thank you for your time, and I will turn this back over to Corey or whoever is managing the open forum. I'm not even sure we have time for an open forum.
Yeah, I
today.
think because of the time, it's 1 until noon at this point, so we're gonna just call it for today. If you do have any questions or problems that you need help with, please post those in the LinkedIn forum, and we'll monitor that, and hopefully somebody might be able to help you out. Yeah, so thank you all for attending today. Fantastic meeting, great presentations. Thank you, Margie. Thank you, Mike. And thank you, Gavin. And thank you to our sponsors. And hopefully we'll see you all in a couple of months at our next meeting. Have a great day.